Chapter 1774. The dragon horn that had transformed into a dragon sword had displayed its formidable combat power, forcing Jiyu Fei to retreat and giving Azure Dragon a chance to catch his breath. Otherwise, he would have lost. Clang. Divine light was also flickering on the two fingers of Jiyu Fei's right hand. The sword fingers and the two dragon swords that had transformed into sword light collided thousands of times in an instant. These two dragon swords were refined by Azure Dragon by refining the two horns on his head. They were his weapons. After going through thousands of tempering, the power of these two dragon swords had definitely surpassed the power of a half-holy tool. However, what made Azure Dragon shocked was that Jiyu Fei had actually used two fingers to block the pair of dragon swords that he had painstakingly refined. The martial body of the human race was indeed strong. Jiyu Fei's martial body was incomparably strong. His two fingers continued to collide with the dragon swords. He wanted to shatter these two dragon swords, but he realized that the material of these two dragon swords was very special and could not be destroyed at all. Swoosh. At this moment, Azure Dragon had already regained his senses. He directly swung his divine dragon tail towards Jiyu Fei, immediately setting off a gust of wind in the valley. This gust of wind blew away the blood demon chi that had enveloped the sky above the valley. Jiyu Fei displayed his unparalleled combat power. He shook off the two dragon swords that were constantly strangling him and then punched towards the sweeping dragon tail. Bang! Jiyu Fei's fist landed squarely on the dragon's sweeping tail, producing a dull sound. The huge dragon's tail was blocked by his fist. Seeing this scene, everyone was shocked. The huge dragon that Azure Dragon had transformed into was incomparably powerful. With a sweep of the dragon tail, even a mountain in front of it would be turned into powder. However, Jiyu Fei only used a fist to block this attack. Just how powerful was his fist? This Jiyu Fei's martial body is too strong. When fighting with him, we must not let him get close. The voice of the Vermilion Bird Princess came from the chariot high up in the sky. Although Jiyu Fei is strong, my white tiger true body is not to be trifled with. The Tiger Emperor of the White Tiger race muttered to himself. Jiyu Fei's strength had already surpassed his expectations. This human martial body could already defeat his elder brother Hu Zhon hundreds of years ago. Today, this person was even more powerful and terrifying. On the body of the Tiger Emperor, tiger stripes could be faintly seen. His battle blood was boiling. Such a powerful opponent was exactly what he wanted to encounter. A crazed light flashed in his eyes. The stronger Jiyu Fei was, the more his potential would be stimulated. The powerful battle prowess that Jiyu Fei had displayed caused all the experts who were interested in the Holy Road to feel immense pressure. Fighting for supremacy on the Holy Road, it was unknown whether it was their tragedy or Jiyu Fei's fortune to encounter such a person. All of this was unknown. Kill. The Azure Dragon displayed the most direct attack. Dragon-shaped Dao patterns appeared on his huge dragon body. He directly used his powerful physique to fight Jiyu Fei. A pair of dragon claws tore through the void, grabbing towards Jiyu Fei. HMPH, fighting me head-on? That's my strength. Jiyu Fei laughed coldly. Although the Azure Dragon in the form of a huge dragon also had an incomparably powerful physique, he had been constantly tempering his own martial body along the way. Such a martial body could definitely suppress the Azure Dragon in the form of a huge dragon. Boom. Bang. An intense battle erupted. This was close combat. Although the body of the Azure Dragon in the form of a huge dragon was huge, it did not affect his agility at all. Jiyu Fei and the Azure Dragon exchanged thousands of blows in an instant. The dull sounds of collisions were like a series of muffled explosions. Good. You are the first person to be able to fight me in close combat for so long. Jiyu Fei shouted. The martial path true force that surged out from his fists became stronger and stronger. His fists were covered with divine marks of the great path. It was this pair of fists that caused the huge dragon body of the Azure Dragon to be covered in blood. Blood-colored fist marks appeared on the huge dragon body. And Jiyu Fei did not have it easy either. His body was covered in wounds left by the dragon claws and the two dragon swords. Boom. With a loud bang, the two strong cultivators exchanged more than 10,000 blows. Both of them were sent flying. Too strong. With these two people, there will be many fewer competitors on the holy road. Gui Teng, who was on the short mountain, was shocked to see this scene. With Jiyu Fei and the Azure Dragon blocking the holy road, how many people could pass through? Jiyu Fei and the Azure Dragon were two huge mountains on the holy road. It would be very difficult to pass through them. Some people with ambitions of the holy road began to waver. However, some people's fighting spirit was even stronger. These people were extremely determined. They wanted to pass the two mountains. Even some of the old antiques saw Jiyu Fei and the Azure Dragon as strong opponents. Master will win. In another direction, on a mountain outside the Valley of Gods and Demons, Jiyu Zhong and He Tian were also watching the two figures in the valley nervously. Boss Jiyu hasn't used the 9 secrets of the immortal path yet. He Tian was very confident in Jiyu Fei, because Jiyu Fei still had something to rely on. This was not his full strength. Of course, the Azure Dragon also had something to rely on. He had not used the Azure Dragon real body. This was an almost invincible secret technique that could only be used after activating the Azure Dragon's Paragon bloodline. This secret technique was a great secret of the Azure Dragon clan. Very few people could cultivate it, but the current Azure Dragon had to cultivate this secret technique. Only the strong cultivators of the Azure Dragon clan who had cultivated this secret technique could be called the true Azure Dragon. If the Azure Dragon had not cultivated this secret technique, he would not have been given the title of Azure Dragon. Again, Jiyu Fei let out a furious roar and continued to charge forward. At that moment, the huge body of the Azure Dragon rapidly shrank. In the end, a small dragon that was only 2 to 3 feet long appeared before everyone's eyes. This, although the body of the dragon had shrunk, Jiyu Fei could feel that this small dragon was much stronger and more terrifying than the previous one. The Azure Dragon's power had increased again. Swoosh! The small dragon's speed was extremely fast. In an instant, it disappeared from where it was. It tore through the void and pounced towards the charging Jiyu Fei. The small dragon's speed was even faster than before. However, Jiyu Fei possessed the world's fastest speed. Such speed was nothing in front of Jiyu Fei. Boom! The two silhouettes collided in an instant. This was the most direct confrontation, and it was even more terrifying than any divine ability or great technique. As long as one side was no match for the other would be able to tear the weaker side into pieces in an instant, destroying both the body and spirit of the weaker side. An even more intense battle broke out. The two figures moved quickly in the Valley of Gods and Demons. They were so fast that they could not be seen by the naked eye. Even those who had cultivated the divine eyes could only see two very faint figures. Chapter 1775. The Azure Dragon, who had transformed into a dragon, was extremely powerful. It had a dragon body that was comparable to a martial body. As it battled with Jiyu Fei in the Valley of Gods and Demons, the entire valley shook violently and cracks appeared. If not for the baleful blood demonic pattern sealing the entire Valley of Gods and Demons would have been destroyed. Rumble! The two shocking powers collided continuously, causing the heavens and earth to shake. Black spatial cracks appeared in the sky above the Valley of Gods and Demons, like black lightning flashing past. The space between heaven and earth was cracked, but the laws of heaven and earth were quickly repairing the cracked space. The two of them have already left most of the others behind. Those who were aiming for the holy road all felt immense pressure. No one was willing to meet such powerful and terrifying opponents while fighting for supremacy on the holy road. The older generation was also extremely shocked. The strength of Jiyu Fei and the Azure Dragon had already exceeded their expectations. The competition on the holy road was destined to be extremely fierce. At this time, the yin-yang divine pattern was high up in the sky. The figure on the divine pattern seemed to have existed since ancient times. He just sat there cross-legged, suppressing the great path of heaven and earth. Although the fierce man from the extreme north had not descended with his true body, he was still able to severely injure the leaders of the demons and intimidate all the demons, so that the leaders of the demons did not dare to come out. With the incarnation of the fierce man from the extreme north here, No one had to worry about the demons making any strange moves. Jiyu Fei and Azure Dragon could attack without any hesitation, without any scruples. Boom! In the Valley of Gods and Demons, Jiyu Fei punched out, colliding head-on with the claw of the Azure Dragon that had transformed into a real dragon. The void exploded, and black spatial cracks spread out in all directions from the point of collision between the two forces. Roar! Jiyu Fei roared angrily. The martial true power in his body surged towards his right fist. He was competing with the Azure Dragon in terms of strength, wanting to completely suppress him. Streaks of chaotic aura circled around Jiyu Fei like streaks of chaotic divine rainbow. Every streak of chaotic aura could pierce through the space between heaven and earth. Kill. The Azure Dragon's spiritual sense was like the tide, and a shocking killing chi burst forth. Every scale on the shrunken dragon body glowed, and the aura of a true dragon spread out. The two powerhouses were exerting their full strength in an attempt to overwhelm each other. However, both Jiyu Fei and Azure Dragon were unable to suppress each other for a while. Up until now, the two powerhouses seemed to have fought to a draw. The power that erupted from Jiyu Fei and Azure Dragon's bodies increased rapidly. The void around them could not withstand such power, and black spatial cracks appeared. Even this extremely stable world seemed to be unable to contain their powerful physical bodies. This Azure Dragon, in the valley, the Azure Dragon actually dared to compete with Jiyu Fei in terms of strength. This caused Jiyu Zhong to be incomparably shocked. He was very clear that Jiyu Fei's martial body was strong to the point that it could shatter a half-sacred tool. Could it be that the Azure Dragon's body was also strong enough to stand shoulder to shoulder with his master? In the distant past, the physique of the human race's martial body was definitely one of the strongest physiques in the world. Only a few physiques could stand shoulder to shoulder with it. This Azure Dragon is using the power of the bloodline in his body, He Tian said. His eyes were incomparably sharp. At this moment, he could already see that the sovereign bloodline in Azure Dragon's body was gradually awakening, and the power of a sovereign was gradually being displayed. This was the power that belonged to the ancient Azure Dragon sovereign. This was a kind of talent of the sovereign's descendants. The ancient sovereigns were invincible in the 9 heavens and 10 earths. They were invincible in the 3 realms and 6 Tao. A part of their power was inherited through their bloodline. Once this power hidden in the bloodline was awakened, they could borrow some of the sovereign's power. To a certain extent, the sovereign bloodline in Azure Dragon's body was equivalent to the continuation of the ancient Azure Dragon sovereign's life. As long as his bloodline existed, the Azure Dragon sovereign's power would continue to be inherited. Of course, not everyone could successfully awaken the power of the bloodline in their body. Jiyu Fei's right fist collided with Azure Dragon's dragon claw. The strength of both of them rose rapidly. Martial true force clashed against the power of the true dragon. More and more spatial cracks appeared in the void around them. Boom! In the end, with a muffled sound, with Jiyu Fei and Azure Dragon as the center, the void within a radius of 1,000 feet collapsed. The void of heaven and earth could no longer withstand their powerful strength. Bang! Jiyu Fei and Azure Dragon separated. The two experts were sent flying by each other's strength and rushed out from the shattered void. The warm-up ends here. Jiyu Fei stabilized his figure and stood in the void. His battle intent was like a rainbow, and his eyes were like lightning as he glanced at Azure Dragon in front of him. Martial Dao patterns faintly appeared on Jiyu Fei's skin. An even more powerful force spread out from his body. The spectators outside the Divine Demon Valley were incomparably shocked. At this point in the battle, they were actually just warming up. Obviously, both Jiyu Fei and Azure Dragon still had many tricks up their sleeves. It was still unknown who would win. However, Azure Dragon found it hard to relax. The dragon transformation art was a secret technique of the Azure Dragon clan. By transforming into the dragon ancestor of the Azure Dragon clan, the strength of his fleshly body would increase several-fold. However, in this state, he was only able to fight Jiyu Fei to a standstill. Such an outcome had exceeded Azure Dragon's expectations. Azure Dragon's body surged with true dragon divine light. The dragon image disappeared, and a figure appeared in the true dragon divine light. He transformed back into his human form. The human race's martial body is indeed powerful. Azure Dragon stared at Jiu Fei. There seemed to be stars sinking in his eyes. He knew that it would be very difficult to defeat Jiu Fei. Jiu Fei's cultivation was incomparably powerful. If he was not careful, he would be defeated again. Jiu Fei walked in the void. This time, the power of the 5 elements, metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, surged around him. 5 voids appeared around him. Azure Dragon sensed the power of heaven and earth. Jiu Fei had cultivated an inner world. Swish. Jiu Fei walked in the 5 elements voids. It was as though he had merged with the surrounding heaven and earth. His speed had increased to a terrifying level. With one step, he instantly appeared in front of Azure Dragon. He then stretched out his right hand and slapped at Azure Dragon. On Jiu Fei's right palm, martial Dao patterns emerged and interweaved with the power of the Great Path. This was a sign that martial Dao power and cultivation level had completely merged. This palm fell into Azure Dragon's eyes. He only saw a huge hand expanding infinitely in front of him. It filled every inch of space in front of him and blocked all his escape routes. Buzz. Chapter 1776. Azure Dragon's weapons were 2 dragon swords refined from his dragon horns. These 2 dragon swords were extremely powerful. The power of the true dragon transformed into a shocking sword beam that tore through the world. Upon seeing Azure Dragon strike, even some old sword immortals felt ashamed of their inferiority. Clang! The sword light arrived and hacked down on Jiu Fei's large hand, causing the sound of metal colliding to ring out. Jiu Fei's large hand broke through the sword light and continued slapping towards the Azure Dragon. There were faint Dao patterns on the hand, condensed with the power of the Great Dao. The power of this palm was extremely terrifying. It showed signs of smacking Azure Dragon to death. It's the heaven-covering palm. On a mountain peak outside Godfiend Valley, Jiu Zhong couldn't help but be shocked when he saw his master strike out with such a powerful palm. He never expected the heaven-covering palm's power to reach such a level. The moment the heaven-covering palm was used, it covered the sky, sealing off all paths of retreat. I can't dodge. Azure Dragon was shocked to discover that everywhere he looked was covered by his opponent's palm. It was as though the entire world was covered by his opponent's palm. Since I can't dodge, I'll fight it out. Azure Dragon was ruthless. The dragon sword in his hand displayed terrifying might. Sword beams surged for tens of thousands of feet, tearing the sky and earth apart. It directly shattered everything. Peng! Without any suspense, Jiu Fei's palm was extremely powerful. It was unstoppable and unstoppable. The sword beam emitted by the dragon sword was dispersed by the heaven-covering palm. Azure Dragon was sent flying as blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth. At this moment, Azure Dragon was finally injured. He was forced back by his opponent's power. Roar! Azure Dragon roared. He wanted to win. He wanted to defeat Jiu Fei. Being sent flying by Jiu Fei was something Azure Dragon couldn't accept. He had been defeated by Jiu Fei hundreds of years ago. Was the scene from back then going to repeat itself hundreds of years later? Although you are very strong, you are still not my match. Jiu Fei was serious. His combat strength multiplied. It was as though an ancient god of war had appeared in the present world. He looked down on the world and was invincible. Impossible. This time, I will not lose. Hearing this, Azure Dragon's eyes turned red. He was the current Azure Dragon. In the Azure Dragon clan, even the old Azure Dragon was no match for him. He could not allow himself to experience the humiliation of being defeated by others in his life. Just as Jiu Fei was closing in on the Azure Dragon, a dragon's roar rang out from the Azure Dragon's body. Immediately after, a powerful force awakened within the Azure Dragon's body. Finally using that power, Jiu Fei sensed the changes in the Azure Dragon. Not only was he not shocked, he became excited. The stronger the Azure Dragon was, the less boring this battle would be. Boom! An unimaginably powerful force awakened within the Azure Dragon's body, as if an ancient dragon had awakened from a deep slumber. The divine light in the azure dragon's eyes shot out dozens of feet from its eye sockets. Azure dragon true body. The azure dragon let out a deep roar as scales began to appear on his body. The two dragon swords turned into two dragon horns and flew back to his forehead. A humanoid pure-blooded dragon appeared in front of everyone. The powerful pure-blooded dragon's aura spread out from the Valley of Gods and Demons, shocking all the spectators. The aura of the azure dragon could be felt within a radius of thousands of miles. This is the azure dragon true body. Seeing the azure dragon transform into a humanoid pure-blooded dragon, everyone was shocked. This was the azure dragon true body. It was really surprising. In the end, the azure dragon still used the azure dragon true body. The violent power almost made him go crazy. The power of the bloodline in his body was burning. In order to defeat Jiyu Fei, he couldn't care less. Swoosh! The azure dragon tore through the void and attacked Jiyu Fei. He was so fast that even Jiyu Fei was shocked. Jiyu Fei used the 8 Desolation Void Steps and walked in the void of the 5 elements, barely dodging the attack. However, the azure dragon followed him like a shadow. When his attack missed, he immediately changed his move. He swept his right leg towards Jiyu Fei's waist. Bam! Jiyu Fei blocked the azure dragon's sweeping right leg with his knee, but at the same time, the azure dragon's knife hand had already reached the back of his neck. Damn it! Jiyu Fei hurriedly took a step to the side, dodging the knife hand. However, a few strands of hair floated down from the sky. Although the knife hand didn't hit Jiyu Fei, it did cut off a few strands of Jiyu Fei's hair. After using the azure dragon true body, the azure dragon's combat power had increased by at least 3 times. His speed could now keep up with Jiyu Fei's 8 Desolation Void Steps. This shocked and angered Jiyu Fei. Bam! Boom! Muffled sounds of collision rang out continuously. Azure Dragon and Jiyu Fei started fighting. The Azure Dragon true body was incomparably powerful. Azure Dragon relied on his powerful physical strength to fight Jiyu Fei. Jiyu Fei gradually couldn't hold on any longer. He kept retreating. This Azure Dragon is probably going to force Boss to use the 9 secrets of Immortal Tao. The strength of the Azure Dragon true body exceeded everyone's expectations. Even Jiyu Fei's martial body couldn't block it. This secret art was the trump card of the Azure Dragon clan. Once the 9 secrets of Immortal Tao is used, this Azure Dragon is going to lose. Jiyu Zhong was Jiyu Fei's disciple. No one knew the power of the 9 secrets of Immortal Tao better than him. At this time, Jiyu Fei also fought with all his might. His combat power kept rising, as if there was no end to it. One of the 9 secrets of Immortal Tao, the secret art of Immortal Tao, was gradually activated. Boom! Jiyu Fei threw a punch and the ferocious power caused the entire valley to shake, forcing the Azure Dragon to retreat. The aura on his body grew stronger. His chi and blood soared to the sky. Every move he made contained great power. Even Azure Dragon was secretly shocked. Martial power erupted from Jiyu Fei's body. Azure Dragon's advantage gradually disappeared. Under the effect of the secret art of Immortal Tao, Jiyu Fei's strength increased by leaps and bounds. Swoosh! He disappeared from where he was, and when he reappeared, he was already in front of the Azure Dragon. Everyone was shocked by Jiyu Fei's speed. It was so fast that they could not even see his shadow. Even if someone had cultivated the God's Eye, they would not be able to see Jiyu Fei's figure. Vroom! The power of the 5 elements bloomed in Jiyu Fei's hand. 5 different colored sword lights rushed out from his hand and pierced towards Azure Dragon. The sword lights were so fast that even Azure Dragon could not dodge them. Dragon blood splattered. Azure Dragon's body had 5 bloody holes. His entire body was sent flying thousands of feet away by the 5 elements sword lights, slamming heavily into the blood-colored cliff. Ooah! A mouthful of blood spurted out from the Azure Dragon's mouth, then slid down the cliff. This is Jiyu Fei's true combat power. Azure Dragon wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. His body that was pierced by the 5 elements sword lights was healing rapidly. If it was someone else who had their body pierced, they would have no choice but to abandon their body. Chapter 1777. The five elements' magical swords pierced through the void and left 5 bloody holes on Azure Dragon's powerful body. Blood splattered everywhere. Azure Dragon was finally injured. However, the Azure Dragon's real body was incomparably strong. The 5 elements' sword chi that had invaded Azure Dragon's body were all forced out. A 5-colored divine light rushed out of Azure Dragon's body and then dissipated in the void. The 5 bloody holes on Azure Dragon's body healed rapidly. The blood that flew out flew back into Azure Dragon's body. Not a single drop of blood was lost. At Azure Dragon's level, his flesh, blood, tendons, and bones all contained real dragon chi. He could be reborn from a single drop of blood. This level of injury could not really hurt him. The Azure Dragon's real body is indeed extraordinary. Seeing that Azure Dragon had recovered so quickly, even Jiyu Fei was secretly shocked. Azure Dragon's physical body did not seem to be weaker than his martial body. Clang! The 5 elements' force surged on Jiyu Fei's body. Many sword shadows appeared around him. He had activated the 5 elements' force and condensed them into swords. A shocking sword chi appeared between the sky and the earth. Go! Jiyu Fei waved his hands, and the countless 5 elements' magical swords that were floating around him immediately shot towards the Azure Dragon in front of him. This Azure Dragon sensed danger. Jiyu Fei's battle prowess had exceeded his expectations. Countless multicolored divine swords shot towards him, sealing off the space in front of him. There was no way to dodge. Buzz! Azure Dragon was going all out. His body shook and transparent ripples spread from his body. The void was shaking. A powerful real dragon chi erupted from his body. Dance of the dragons! Azure Dragon shouted. Then, 9 dragon shadows rushed out of his body. The real dragon chi filled the sky. Even the demonic patterns in the Valley of Gods and Demons showed signs of being shaken. The 9 dragon shadows flew across the sky. The thousands of 5 elements sword light that shot towards Azure Dragon were all shattered. The 9 dragon shadows displayed their powerful combat power. Roar! The dragon roared to the heavens. After the 9 dragon shadows shattered Jiyu Fei's 5 elements sword light, they did not stop. Instead, they continued to charge towards Jiyu Fei. These 9 dragon shadows were like 9 real true dragons. They were so powerful that they could tear the world apart. All right. Jiyu Fei stared at the 9 dragon silhouettes in front of him. His eyes narrowed. He could feel the power contained within the 9 dragon silhouettes. The Azure Dragon activated his bloodline power. Jiyu Fei's combat strength soared as he activated the secret skill of ascending to heaven. He did not retreat. Instead, he met the attack head-on. He swung his fist and smashed it at the 9 dragon shadows that were charging at him. This was the simplest and most direct attack. Under the drive of great power, the simplest attack was often the most powerful attack. Boom! Jiyu Fei's fist smashed onto the dragon shadow that was charging at the front. The 2 forces collided, causing a loud explosion. Azure Dragon let out a muffled groan. The dragon shadow that was struck by Jiyu Fei's punch actually collapsed. The strength of Jiyu Fei's punch was so strong that it even made Azure Dragon's heart palpitate. One of the 9 dragon shadows was dissipated by Jiyu Fei. The Azure Dragon suffered the impact and was sent flying hundreds of feet away. A trace of scarlet blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. He finally used that secret skill. The Azure Dragon knew that Jiyu Fei had obtained the 9 secrets of Immortal Tao. This was no secret. Among the 9 secrets of Immortal Tao, there was a secret skill that could temporarily increase one's combat strength. The Azure Dragon clan was one of the 4 oldest ancient clans in the southern wilderness. There were countless ancient books in the clan that recorded many secrets of heaven and earth. There were even records of the various supreme beings of ancient times. One should know that the ancestor of the Azure Dragon clan was a supreme divine beast. The 9 secrets of Immortal Tao created by the supreme Tao ancestor were 9 secret skills that could seize the fortune of heaven and earth. Each of these 9 secret skills had unfathomable power. The secret skills of the Azure Dragon clan are definitely not any weaker than the secret skills created by the Tao ancestor. The Azure Dragon was furious. His entire body radiated with true dragon divine light. Tao patterns that looked like the ancestral dragon swam on his body, interweaving with the power of the great Tao. The remaining 8 dragon shadows were about to materialize from the void. The dragon shadow's combat strength had increased by a large margin. This, Jiyu Fei was shocked. The Azure Dragon could actually increase his combat strength. This was truly shocking. The Azure Dragon clan was indeed worthy of being the bloodline of the ancient supreme divine beasts. None of the Supreme's inheritances were to be trifled with. This was because the inheritances of the supreme divine beasts had a deep foundation that others didn't have. Bang! Jiyu Fei rushed into the middle of the 8 dragon silhouettes and punched them. The powerful force sent the 8 dragon silhouettes flying, but this time, the 8 dragon silhouettes didn't scatter. Roar! Terrifying dragon roars rang out continuously. The 8 dragon shadows seemed like they were about to rush out from the void, turning into true dragons of the 9 heavens. They bared their fangs and brandished their claws as they pounced towards Jiyu Fei. Good fellow! Jiyu Fei's heart trembled. He had always been confident in his own strength. But this time, he had truly met a powerful opponent. His opponent's combat strength couldn't be underestimated. Kill! The Azure Dragon stood high up in the sky. The 8 dragon shadows rushed towards Jiyu Fei from 8 directions. The powerful force sealed the sky and shattered the void. Swoosh! Jiyu Fei disappeared from where he was. He seemed to have disappeared just like that. Even the Azure Dragon was shocked. Jiyu Fei's aura actually disappeared in an instant. This was too sudden. What? The spectators outside the Godfiend Valley were all indescribably shocked. No one could see how Jiyu Fei disappeared. Even those with divine eyes were no exception. How is this possible? Everyone was in disbelief. The methods displayed by Jiyu Fei were too inconceivable. This is one of the 9 secrets of the immortal Tao, void reversal. Only He Tian and Jiyu Zhong knew what happened. At the instant the 8 dragon shadows arrived in front of Jiyu Fei, he had already fused with the void around him. Jiyu Fei's body turned into the void. No one could sense his existence. Only saints who had long jumped out of the great Tao of heaven and earth would be able to tell. Boom! The power of the 8 dragons was too strong. The space where Jiyu Fei was at exploded. Nothing existed anymore. The 8 dragons had destroyed everything, punching a hole in the heavens and earth. However, the Azure Dragon wasn't happy at all. He knew that Jiyu Fei wouldn't be defeated so easily. Jiyu Fei's disappearance caused him to feel extremely uneasy. An opponent hiding in the shadows, a powerful opponent at that. This caused the Azure Dragon to feel a great sense of danger. However, Jiyu Fei disdained using such methods to defeat the Azure Dragon. Hiding in the shadows wasn't his style because he wasn't He Tian. Swoosh! A silhouette suddenly appeared in the void 100 zhong away from the Azure Dragon. Jiyu Fei directly walked out of the void without any warning. The Azure Dragon's expression instantly changed. This method displayed by his opponent was a grave threat to him because before Jiyu Fei appeared, he couldn't sense Jiyu Fei's aura at all. Jiyu Fei had mastered a secret technique that could completely conceal his aura. At this moment, the 8 dragon silhouettes disappeared. The Azure Dragon's attack didn't harm Jiyu Fei at all. This made him extremely depressed. This is the 9 secrets of the immortal Tao. The Azure Dragon stared at Jiyu Fei, who was 100 zhong away. His pupils constricted. That attack just now had consumed a lot of his true dragon strength. At this moment, he didn't dare to act recklessly, nor did he dare to let his opponent see through him. The true dragon chi on his body was still as vigorous as ever. His draconic might shocked everyone. Chimph Jiyu Fei coldly snorted. After that, he moved. He walked in the air, approaching the Azure Dragon step by step. Every step he took caused the heavens and earth to tremble. He controlled the pulse of the heavens and earth, bringing with him the power of the heavens and earth to suppress the Azure Dragon. Boom, 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 it was as if the heavens and earth were sinking. Ripples visible to the naked eye appeared in the air. With Jiyu Fei's own strength and the power of the heavens and earth, this attack would make even a half-saint feel hopeless. This Jiyu Fei, outside the Valley of Gods and Demons, everyone who saw this scene was extremely shocked. Even the arrogant tiger emperor and the arrogant vermilion bird princess couldn't help but be moved. The cultivators who were interested in the holy road were also shocked. There was actually such a powerful existence on the road ahead. How could they fight against such a person? This was definitely a rare golden era. The fight for supremacy on the holy road would be unprecedentedly tragic. The holy road was destined to be a road paved with blood and bones. The battle between Jiyu Fei and the Azure Dragon might really be the prelude to a new era. "Mph, you want to use such methods to suppress me?" The Azure Dragon sneered. Then, countless dragon-shaped Tao patterns rushed out of his body and imprinted themselves in the air. The Azure Dragon borrows the power of the heavens. The Azure Dragon roared. An immeasurable wave of Daoist aura began to spread out from his body. Then, the power of the entire world began to reverse. Boom, boom, boom. The power of the heavens and earth was reversed by the Azure Dragon. He was like the god of creation of the heavens and earth, using a secret technique to control the power of the heavens and earth. This was not the terrifying part of the secret technique. As the power of the heavens and earth reversed, terrifying bolts of lightning descended from the sky. Earth fire surged out of the ground and a large amount of water formed in the air. Astral winds appeared out of nowhere and blew towards Jiyu Fei. The four primal powers of earth, water, fire, and wind, under the control of the Azure Dragon, all rushed towards Jiyu Fei. The astral winds, the earth fire, the large amount of water, and the chaotic earth chi. Each of these powers was enough to tear the heavens and earth apart and destroy all life. The four powers appeared at the same time. This was definitely a terrifying thing. It was like the end of the world. The four powers intertwined and displayed terrifying power. Even Jiyu Fei was moved at this time. Chapter 1778. Azure Dragon was extremely powerful. He was borrowing the power of heaven and earth to draw upon the four primordial energies of earth, water, wind, and fire. The four primordial powers displayed great might. Within the divine demon valley, it was as if the heavens and earth were being split apart. A terrifying fluctuation that could destroy the world surged out from the valley. Too strong. This Azure Dragon is incredible. He's worthy of being called an invincible existence among the four ancient clans of the southern wasteland. Even some of the old-timers couldn't help but be moved by this scene. Azure Dragon's power was truly frightening. If it was an ordinary half-step saint, they would have long since been killed by him. However, Jiyu Fei wasn't a half-step saint. Azure Dragon was still fighting bitterly. Although he was a half-step saint, he couldn't take down a peak expert like Jiyu Fei. Boom. At the center of the four primordial forces, Jiyu Fei punched out and tore a hole through the encirclement of the four primordial forces. Everyone was shocked. Azure Dragon had drawn upon the power of heaven and earth to seal the void, but he couldn't seal Jiyu Fei. Kill. Jiyu Fei activated the Heaven Ascension secret technique. At this moment, his battle strength had soared to a level that made everyone's heart palpitate. His powerful aura spread in all directions, and the void around him constantly rippled with visible spatial ripples. Within those spatial ripples, there were even hair-like black cracks. Those were spatial rifts. Rumble, four primordial energies soared into the sky and turned into four huge dragons that swallowed Jiyu Fei. The destructive power intimidated everyone who was watching the battle from afar. The void was collapsing. These four energies were too powerful. The baleful blood runes in the entire Godfiend Valley lit up, and the powerful impact caused the runes to awaken. The changes in the Godfiend Valley shocked the spectators. This was the power condensed from the undying laws of the demonic path. It had transformed into the baleful blood Tao runes that were imprinted on every inch of the Godfiend Valley's soil. Many of the indestructible demonic patterns had been shaken, which showed how powerful and terrifying the Azure Dragon was. Chaotic rebellion. Jiyu Fei uttered those two words in a deep voice. An unfathomable power spread out from his body and the world seemed to have been turned upside down in an instant. The four dragons charging towards Jiyu Fei were immediately forced to turn around and charge back at him. The four primal energies of earth, water, wind, and fire condensed into a great dragon, condensing a shocking destructive power, directly shattering the heavens and the earth, turning a region into nothingness. This was one of the Azure Dragon's strongest attacks, drawing upon the four primordial forces of heaven and earth. However, at this moment, these four forces of energy were instantly reversed by the opponent and were now rushing back to him. This shocked the Azure Dragon. How is this possible? Outside the divine demon valley, everyone who saw this scene was stunned. The Azure Dragon's powerful attack had actually been reversed, and all of the power that was rushing towards Jiu Fei had been pushed back towards the Azure Dragon. What happened? This is way too heaven-defying. Everyone was shocked. What kind of great technique did Jiu Fei use to have such unbelievable power that it could reverse the opponent's attack? Didn't this mean that he was undefeatable? The Azure Dragon knew that this was one of the 9 secrets of the Immortal Path, the Chaotic Rebellion secret technique. This Jiu Fei had most likely gathered all 9 secrets of the Immortal Path. This was not a good thing. The 9 secrets of the Immortal Path, in the distant past, were known as the undefeatable secret techniques of the Immortal Path. The Supreme Tao Ancestor created these 9 secret techniques of the Immortal Path by evolving the Great Tao of the Supremes. It could be said that these 9 secret techniques of the Immortal Path were the strongest secret techniques in the world. Because these were the Supremes. Roar. The Azure Dragon roared in anger. Tao patterns that looked like the ancestral dragon rushed out of his body. The power of the true dragon burst out, and an incomparably huge dragon shadow rushed out of his body. It was as if an ancient beast had awakened in his body. A saintly might appeared in the world, shocking the surroundings. The Azure Dragon was a half-saint and had a trace of the aura of a saint. When he fully activated the power of the bloodline in his body, his combat strength soared to a terrifying height. At this moment, even if a saint came personally, the Azure Dragon would dare to fight against him. All right. Seeing this, Jiu Fei's eyes flickered. The Azure Dragon made him feel an immense pressure. The bloodline of the Azure Dragon race was extraordinary. Above the head of the Azure Dragon, Dragon Chi rose and a huge dragon shadow appeared in the sky. Boom! The destructive power that came back was completely dispersed by the Azure Dragon. He was like a god that split open the sky, tearing through the void and charging at Jiu Fei with a monstrous battle intent. Secret Technique of Ascension, 100%. Jiu Fei did not dare to be slow. He immediately activated the Secret Technique of Ascension. His combat strength instantly increased by 10 times. The powerful martial arts energy shook the heavens and earth. A chaotic fist collided with the right hand of the Azure Dragon. Bang! With a muffled sound, a large area of the void collapsed and was annihilated. Jiu Fei and the Azure Dragon moved quickly in the void, constantly clashing head-on. The whole valley was covered with dense cracks. The baleful blood demonic pattern was faintly discernible, suppressing the area, completely dissolving the mighty power of the 2 super experts. The cracked valley was rapidly repairing itself. Too strong, the intensity of this battle exceeded everyone's expectations. The combat strength of Jiu Fei and the Azure Dragon had already surpassed the half-saint level. They had already walked very far on the holy road. In the entire human world, very few people could catch up with them on the holy road. All kinds of great techniques and combat skills were constantly displayed in the hands of the 2 super experts, shocking everyone. The powerful waves caused the experts watching the battle to retreat. Only the figure on the yin-yang divine pattern in the sky seemed to have existed since ancient times. The mighty power that came from the valley could not affect the figure at all. The fierce man in the extreme north was too powerful. He was definitely an invincible existence in the human world, at the same level as the Ghost Emperor of Fengdu. This time, the Ghost Emperor of Fengdu did not appear. The speed of the 2 super experts was extremely fast. Even those who had cultivated the gods would find it difficult to catch their figures. In just a few breaths, the 2 had already exchanged nearly 10,000 moves. Neither of them used the saint-level divine weapons. This was a kind of tacit understanding. Neither of them wanted to use external forces to fight. Apart from the weapons that they had refined themselves, they were only fighting with their own strength. This was a battle and also a training. They both wanted to use their own strength to suppress the other. Both Jiyu Fei and the Azure Dragon were people who were determined to walk the holy road. Their wills were extremely firm and they both had an invincible heart. Azure Dragon, if this is all you have, you are going to lose. Jiyu Fei's voice sounded in the heart of the Azure Dragon. This was a divine telepathy. If this is all you have, you are going to lose too. The Azure Dragon was tit for tat. The two were talking, but they did not stop. Bang! Jiyu Fei swept his right leg. The Azure Dragon used a knee to meet Jiyu Fei's sweeping right leg. The two clashed head-on, and there was a sound of metal colliding, like two pieces of divine metal colliding. Jiyu Fei and the Azure Dragon separated, but in an instant, they rushed together again. Buzz! The two dragon swords vibrated. While the Azure Dragon attacked, he also controlled the two divine swords and kept attacking Jiyu Fei. The sword light shot into the sky. Jiyu Fei did not use the 9 Heaven Stars sword. He was a human-shaped weapon and was extremely powerful. His martial body could directly compete with the dragon swords that the Azure Dragon refined himself. This powerful martial body caused the Azure Dragon to encounter great trouble. Clang! The sword light formed by the two dragon swords slashed on Jiyu Fei's body, and there was a sound of metal colliding. Other than cutting a few holes on Jiyu Fei's clothes, it was difficult to really hurt him. I'm afraid the Azure Dragon is going to lose. At this time, some people could already see that Jiyu Fei was in an invincible position. No matter how the Azure Dragon attacked, he could not hurt him. But Jiyu Fei could hurt the Azure Dragon. As expected, Jiyu Fei punched and directly sent the two dragon swords flying. Then, he directly collided with the Azure Dragon and sent him flying. The powerful impact almost shattered the Azure Dragon's sternum. This was a barbaric way of fighting. Jiyu Fei was like a peerless ferocious beast, rampaging around. With his powerful martial body, he forced the Azure Dragon to continuously retreat, and from time to time, he was sent flying. Now that the battle had come to this point, it was time to determine a victor and a loser. And the winner of this battle was already very obvious. Jiyu Fei clearly had the upper hand, suppressing the Azure Dragon. Although the Azure Dragon was strong, Jiyu Fei was stronger than him. In the face of absolute power, all divine powers and great techniques were useless. One punch could smash everything. Bang! Jiyu Fei punched the Azure Dragon's chest again. The strong fist energy caused the Azure Dragon's chest to collapse, and countless cracks appeared on his sternum. The Azure Dragon opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood, and he was sent flying. How is this possible? I will not lose. The Azure Dragon could not believe it. He was defeated by the hands of Jiyu Fei hundreds of years ago, and now he was repeating the same mistake. This made him shocked, angry, and unwilling. Kill. He stopped retreating, bit the tip of his tongue, and spat out a mouthful of essence blood. A blood-colored figure appeared before him, and an invincible presence that looked down on the world appeared in the world. Jiyu Fei was shocked. He could feel the aura of an ancient supreme being from the blood-colored figure. What is the Azure Dragon doing? He actually did not hesitate to use his primordial chi to fully display the power of his bloodline. The blood-colored figure was completely formed by the Azure Dragon's blood. As if it had a life of its own, it pressed towards Jiyu Fei. The powerful pressure made Jiyu Fei feel like he was facing an ancient supreme being. This is the true secret of the bloodline. Some people who knew the details said such words. The secret of the supreme being's bloodline was only known to the descendants of the supreme being. Only by knowing this secret could one truly use the power within one's body. Chapter 1779. The power of the supreme being bloodline was incomparably strong. One could borrow the power of a supreme being. Even though it wasn't the true power of a supreme being, it was still extremely strong. Rumble. The entire void was trembling. That blood-colored figure was like an ancient supreme being beast king. The power of the great Tao was boundless, and it was completely formed from the power of the laws. This was the sign of the bloodline of the ancient supreme being beast king awakening in the body of its descendant. Jiyu Fei could not help but feel shocked. To think that the power of the laws of the ancient supreme being Beast King would appear once more. Even though it wasn't the complete law of the supreme being of the great Tao, it was still more than enough to kill all half-saints and quasi-saints. Green Dragon is invincible in the current generation. Some of the old antiques were extremely shocked. The foundation of the Green Dragon race was truly deep. For such a monster to appear, it wasn't that easy to awaken the supreme being bloodline. In the entire Green Dragon race, there were probably only 10 or so people who could awaken the supreme being bloodline within their bodies. The degree of awakening of the bloodline was different as well. Only the person with the strongest bloodline could become the Green Dragon of the current generation. The blood-colored figure was extremely strong. As though it had a life of its own, it charged out at Gu Fei. The mighty might it exuded caused the surrounding void to crumble. Gu Fei was facing a formidable foe. At this moment, he could feel the aura of danger. However, the stronger he was, the stronger he got. His battle intent was getting stronger. Is this the power of the ancient supreme beings? Gu Fei's battle intent was boundless. He did not retreat. He wanted to fight against the power of the ancient supreme beings with all his might. Gu Fei, it's time for you to admit defeat. Otherwise, the Green Dragon roared out. This was his strongest battle strength. The power of the bloodline within his body seemed to have been sucked dry, and he felt as though he was about to collapse. The moment the power of the bloodline was released, he would definitely not rest until he was dead. Given the current cultivation state of the Green Dragon, it was still hard for him to control this power. The moment that blood-colored figure attacked, it would definitely not stop until it killed Gu Fei. Admit defeat. I, Gu Fei, have never admitted defeat ever since I stepped onto this path. Come, I want to see what's so great about this supreme bloodline. A pitilessly powerful aura erupted from Gu Fei's body. Rays of chaotic divine light circled around him. The divine light was powerful enough to tear the void apart. What is he doing? Could it be that he wants to contend against the power of an ancient supreme? The spectators outside the divine demon valley were all shocked. At this time, the Azure Dragon had already won. How could the current Gu Fei contend against the power of the supreme bloodline? At this moment, even the figure of the yin-yang divine diagram, who was sitting cross-legged high up in the sky, had a reaction. His gaze swept down towards the divine demon valley. No one knew how powerful the ancient supremes were. Without reaching that realm, it was impossible to know what kind of existence they were. The power of the supremes could be integrated into the bloodline and passed down to their descendants. This kind of inheritance could only be possessed by the supremes. Of course, the bloodline of the supremes would gradually weaken as it was passed down from generation to generation. However, there was also a special phenomenon. This phenomenon was the phenomenon of ancestry. The Azure Dragon was not the son of the ancient Beast King, but the Supreme's bloodline in his body was comparable to the son of the ancient Emperor. If that's the case, then accept your fate. The Azure Dragon did not say anything else. He directly attacked. The blood-colored figure tore through the void and slammed a palm at Gu Fei. The powerful force even destroyed some of the nearby blood-killing demonic marks. This was not an ordinary demonic mark. It was formed by the undying law of the ancient demons. Secret skill of ascension, 20% power. Gu Fei was going all out. Even if it was the power of the Supremes, so what? I'll break it with one punch. Under the activation of the secret skill of ascension, his power skyrocketed. Martial Dao true force increased by 20 times. Only the martial body of a pinnacle almighty could withstand it. However, Gu Fei was taking a risk. This kind of power had exceeded the endurance of his pinnacle almighty martial body. The explosive increase in power caused hideous bloody scars to appear on his body. Dao patterns that he had comprehended appeared on his martial body and were imprinted on his flesh and blood. Bang! Gu Fei struck out with his strongest punch. This was his strongest punch, 20 times the power. This definitely surpassed a half-saint and could even contend against a quasi-saint. Even a quasi-sage would explode if he were to be hit by this punch. Boom! The extremely ferocious punch collided with the blood-colored palm. The blood figure seemed illusory and had no physical body. However, the power of the Supremes was so tyrannical that even a quasi-saint would tremble. There was no suspense. Everything developed as the old antiques had expected. Jiyu Fei was sent flying and spurted out a mouthful of blood. His entire arm was twisted and his bones were broken. The power of the Azure Dragon's bloodline was far stronger than he had expected. Master, Jiyu Zhong couldn't stay calm after seeing this scene. The power of the Azure Dragon's bloodline was too strong. Even a true quasi-saint wouldn't be a match for the current Azure Dragon. What are you panicking for? Your master will be fine. He Tian was calmer than Jiyu Zhong. He knew that even if the Azure Dragon used the power of his bloodline, he wouldn't be able to kill Jiyu Fei. Unless a true saint attacked Jiyu Fei, even those peerless existences in the human world wouldn't be able to harm Jiyu Fei's life. Catcher. The sound of bones vibrating could be heard in the valley. Jiyu Fei's right arm was healing rapidly. The broken bones were joining together and the flesh was growing again. In the blink of an eye, his right arm was completely healed as if it had never been injured. With Jiyu Fei's current cultivation, he had already cultivated his life to every part of his body. It wouldn't be a problem for him to be reborn from a single drop of blood. The human race's martial body is indeed extraordinary. Everyone who was watching the battle outside the Divine Demon Valley was amazed. Such a powerful body was rarely seen in the world. Even the bodies of some divine beasts wouldn't be as strong as this. If he becomes a saint, it will be terrible. Some people couldn't sit still, especially those enemies of Jiyu Fei. The stronger Jiyu Fei was, the greater the threat he posed to them. These people couldn't bear to see Jiyu Fei become a saint. The power of the Azure Dragon's bloodline was too strong. Even Jiyu Fei was sent flying. Roar! Jiyu Fei roared angrily. His long hair fluttered in the wind as he charged forward with an indomitable will. Powerful martial arts power erupted. The power of 20 times ascension was too strong. He had no choice but to use it. If he did not vent out this power, it would cause his martial body to explode. Boom! Another terrifying collision. Jiyu Fei was sent flying again. Blood splattered in the sky. Ascension, Jiyu Fei roared. He used 2 secret arts of the immortal Tao at the same time. His cracked body quickly healed. The power of ascension allowed his martial body to maintain its peak state. The blood that had splashed out from his body also flew back and returned to his body. Every drop of his flesh and blood contained essence qi. He couldn't lose it because every drop of blood was life. As long as a drop of blood existed, he could be reborn from a single drop of blood. What a guy! Seeing this, Azure Dragon couldn't help but exclaim. Jiyu Fei's life force was too strong. His qi and blood were even more vigorous than a dragon's. Killing someone like him was definitely not an easy task. In fact, Azure Dragon also wanted to kill Jiyu Fei. He only had one goal, and that was to defeat Jiyu Fei. Jiyu Fei was the same. He didn't have any intention to kill Azure Dragon. He didn't have any enmity with Azure Dragon. This was a battle between experts. It was a fair battle. If he lost or died, he couldn't blame anyone. The Blood Shadow was incomparably powerful. It was like the Azure Dragon sovereign from ancient times. Although the sovereign's law was incomplete, it was enough to sweep away all opponents below the Sage Realm. Jiyu Fei was unyielding. He charged forward again and again, fighting with the Blood Shadow. Although he was forced back each time, he stood up again and again. Everyone was visibly moved by the scene before them. He's a natural-born fighter. Some old antiques sighed. In the distant past, there was no lack of such figures in the world of cultivation. They were all powerful existences. Cultivators who were successful in cultivation were invincible in the same realm. However, Jiyu Fei wasn't fighting against a peak expert. He was fighting against a half-saint. In everyone's opinion, it was already a miracle that he could fight until now. If he can win, then he'll really be heaven-defying. Jiyu Fei's enemies also appeared in the vicinity. These people were secretly happy when they saw Jiyu Fei being suppressed by the Blood Shadow. It would be best if Azure Dragon killed Jiyu Fei. That way, they would have one less problem. A cultivator who was about to rise has fallen just like that. It's really sad. Ji Yufei was still fighting. However, some people already knew the result. They thought that Ji Yufei was struggling on his deathbed and would be defeated in the end. Master won't lose. Ji Yuzhong didn't believe that Ji Yufei would lose to Azure Dragon. However, the truth was right in front of him. He didn't want to see this result. Haitian didn't say anything after hearing their discussion. He just sneered. The power of bloodline is really strong. Ji Yufei only stopped after charging over 100 times. His martial body was almost destroyed by the blood shadow. His body was covered with ghastly wounds. However, his qi and blood were still extremely vigorous. The power of the Ascension secret technique was circulating. The injuries on his martial body were healing rapidly. It was as if he had an immortal body. The Ascension secret technique was a supreme secret technique created by the Supreme Tao Ancestor. This secret technique had already reached the limit of life. It was very difficult to kill someone who had cultivated this secret technique. Even if his divine soul was scattered, he could still gather his divine soul. If this secret technique was cultivated to the great success stage, it might really be able to reach the level of immortality. However, Ji Yufei's secret technique was still very far from the great success stage. The 9 secrets of immortal Tao is indeed a supreme divine technique. The blood shadow stood in front of Azure Dragon. Azure Dragon's eyes flickered. Ji Yufei's strength had far exceeded his expectations. If he didn't use the power of his bloodline, he would have already been defeated. Again. Ji Yufei shouted and rushed forward again. The blood shadow in front of Azure Dragon also rushed forward. Chapter 1780. Kill. Ji Yufei attacked like a madman. The primal chaos fist shattered the void. Holes appeared one after another in the heavens and earth under his fists. He was too strong. This was the manifestation of pure power. His punch could shatter the starry sky. Even the bodies of half-saints and quasi-saints would be shattered if they were hit by his punch. Using strength to prove one's Tao is indeed the most powerful path. Some old antiques sighed. The path of martial arts was a path of using strength to prove one's Tao. It was extremely difficult. In order to achieve success in cultivation, one had to put in a lot more effort than others. Since the late period of primitive times, there were not many existences like Ji Yufei in the world. You're not strong enough. You're destined to lose. Azure Dragon's voice rang in Ji Yufei's mind. He was moving rapidly with the blood shadow formed by the power of his bloodline, not daring to leave the range of the blood shadow's power. At this moment, Ji Yufei was strong enough to kill a half-saint. Even a quasi-saint would have to retreat. If it was not for the protection of the power of his bloodline, Azure Dragon would have been injured. Lose your head. Ji Yufei roared. His long hair danced wildly. He was so ferocious that it made everyone's heart palpitate. Blood kept dripping from his fists. Even so, he still swung his fist at the blood-colored figure. Without any suspense, he was still firmly suppressed by the blood shadow. He could not lift his head and was sent flying by the blood shadow again and again. How could he be so strong? Although Ji Yufei seemed to be attacking without a care for his life, he knew better than anyone else that he would be exhausted to death if this went on. One should know that there was a time limit to the secret skill of rising to heaven. He could not maintain this almost invincible state all the time. Once this state disappeared, he would lose without a doubt. Fortunately, he cultivated the secret skill of ascension. This secret skill could heal injuries to the body and even the spirit quickly. He also realized that if he used the secret skill of ascension and the secret skill of rising to heaven together, he could maintain his martial body in a strange state. In this marvelous state, the duration of his ascension secret technique was greatly extended. Ji Yufei hadn't expected this to happen. The duration of the ascension secret technique had been extended, which allowed him to remain undefeated for the time being. However, this wasn't a long-term solution. Based on the current situation, his ending would be the same in the end. It was unchangeable. I don't want to kill you, but, the Azure Dragon spoke again. No one knew better than him how powerful the power of bloodline was. Unless there was another inheritance with the power of a supreme being's bloodline, he was already invincible among those of the same level. They could even challenge demi-saints. Cut the crap. Let's have a fair fight. I won't have any regrets even if I die. Ji Yufei's fighting spirit had never weakened. Instead, it had become even more exuberant. He could feel that the bottleneck of his cultivation seemed to have loosened after he displayed his full strength. Very good. Azure Dragon was speechless. Killing a genius was not a pleasant thing to do. Bang! The blood-colored silhouette attacked. It was as powerful as an ancient supreme beast king. The laws of the beast king shook the heavens and earth as if it wanted to trample on the great Tao of heaven and earth. Ji Yufei fought against the blood-colored silhouette directly. His chest was pierced through and he was sent flying, blood splattering everywhere. In the end, they aren't on the same level. The spectators didn't think that Ji Yufei would win. The bloodline of a supreme beast king was extraordinary. Even a true demi-saint might not be a match for the Azure Dragon. If Ji Yufei was a demi-saint, he might be able to suppress the Azure Dragon. But now, it seemed that he would definitely lose this battle. Master is invincible. How could he lose to the Azure Dragon? Ji Yuzhong wasn't willing to accept such an outcome. One should know that a few hundred years ago, this Azure Dragon was defeated by his master. He didn't think that the Azure Dragon would win this time. But based on the current situation, the chances of Ji Yufei losing were really high. Don't worry, He Tian was still calm. Even if Ji Yufei lost, his life wouldn't be in danger. Boom! At this moment, countless Dao runes rushed out from Ji Yufei's body. His chest that was pierced through rapidly recovered. The power of the Heaven Ascension secret art was healing his body. Even the 9 secrets of the immortal Tao can't change anything. The Azure Dragon's cold voice rang out. The blood-colored silhouette pressed forward and attacked again. This time, the power of the ancient Emperor Law shattered a small part of Ji Yufei's body. I can be reborn from a single drop of blood. I can't be killed. Ji Yufei said coldly. The small part of his body that was shattered was surging. The shackles of his flesh and blood regenerated in an instant, completely recovering. It's one of the 9 secrets of the immortal Tao, the Heaven Ascension secret art. The expressions of some of the old experts in the audience changed. This secret art had an unfathomable might. Legend has it that even if one's primordial spirit was shattered, one could use this secret art to reconstruct it. In the distant past, one of the 9 secrets of the immortal Tao, the Heaven Ascension secret art was known as the Undying secret art. It was truly difficult to kill someone who cultivated this secret art. The Azure Dragon didn't say anything. Actions were more useful than words. Roar. The blood-colored silhouette of a dragon appeared. The blood silhouette unleashed a great art, transforming into countless dragons that lunged at Ji Yufei. Each dragon silhouette was formed from the ancestral dragon runes. This was the power of a supreme beast emperor from the ancient era. Clearly, the Azure Dragon was getting impatient. He wanted to end this battle. However, would things really develop as he expected? Come! Ji Yufei roared. His body suddenly turned faint and illusory, as though he was about to fuse with the void around him. Return to truth. Ji Yufei unleashed these 2 secret arts. His body fused with the void. His illusory body emanated a heaven-devouring force that devoured the dragons coming from all directions. You're courting death. The Azure Dragon's heart couldn't help but tremble upon seeing this. His opponent actually wanted to devour his bloodline power. This was simply self-destruction. Could the bloodline power of a supreme beast emperor be devoured? He's insane. Outside the Valley of Gods and Demons, the spectators were all shocked. Ji Yufei actually wanted to devour the bloodline power of an ancient beast emperor. This was too crazy. Big Ji, this fellow, this time, even Erebus, who had always been calm, could no longer remain calm. Swish. The heaven-devouring force was incomparably powerful. Countless dragon silhouettes rushed into Ji Yufei's illusory body. He wanted to use one of the 9 secrets of the immortal Tao, the Return to Truth secret art, to transform the Azure Dragon's bloodline power. Return to truth. All energy can be transformed into their most primitive state. Chapter 1781. The 9 secrets of the immortal path were known as the invincible secret arts. Each of the 9 secret arts had its own heaven-defying might. The secret art of returning truth could transform all the power of heaven and earth into one's own. Rumble, Gu Fei's illusory figure was shaking, and even the void was shaking with it. The power of returning truth was circulating rapidly, and terrifying energy waves spread in all directions. Countless Tao patterns rushed out of his body, sealing the void between heaven and earth. Countless blood-colored dragon shadows were actually sealed in Gu Fei's illusory figure, unable to rush out. That was part of the ancient Supreme Beast King's power of laws, but it was sealed. How is this possible? Azure Dragon was dumbfounded, and even the spectators outside the Valley of Gods and Demons were dumbfounded. What happened was beyond their understanding. Azure Dragon was the one who felt it the most. He could feel that his bloodline power was rapidly weakening. The place where Gu Fei was turned into a vortex that could devour everything. It actually pulled the blood-colored figure into the vortex and swallowed it as well. This Azure Dragon was truly shocked. He had never thought that Gu Fei had actually cultivated such a secret art. The power of the secret art of returning truth was beyond his expectations. Roar! Gu Fei roared. He was giving it his all. If he could refine this bloodline power, he could win. He could even use this power to break through the bottleneck of cultivation and become a half-step saint. At this time, the bloodline power of the Supreme Beast King that Gu Fei had swallowed into his body was struggling left and right, trying to break through Gu Fei's seal and escape. However, all of this seemed to be in vain. Gu Fei had sealed and refined this bloodline power, so how could it easily escape? I'll give it my all. It was either succeed or die. Gu Fei was gambling with his life. The secret art of returning truth could refine the bloodline power of the ancient Supreme Beast King. If he couldn't, he would die. Roar! Gu Fei roared. It was difficult for others to know what kind of pain he was enduring. That faint and incorporeal figure of his was pierced by bloody light from time to time. Countless blood-colored Tao patterns appeared in his body. Those Tao patterns were shaped like the ancestral dragon. They were the supreme dragon patterns of the Azure Dragon clan. Damn it! The Azure Dragon is borrowing the power of the sky. The Azure Dragon found it hard to remain calm. Gu Fei was currently refining his own bloodline power. If that bloodline power was really refined by the other party, then he might not be able to be the current Azure Dragon of the Azure Dragon clan anymore. The 4 primordial forces of earth, water, wind, and fire appeared once again, crazily attacking Gu Fei. The entire valley was on the verge of collapsing, and even the blood-killing demonic mark was almost unable to protect this valley. Both of them are monsters. Some of the elders watching the battle felt their hearts palpitate. The 2 of them had walked much further on the holy road than ordinary people, especially Gu Fei. Once he became a half-saint, he would probably be able to sweep away all opponents below the saint level. A martial body becoming a saint was something that had never happened since the late period of the Desolate Era. The place where Gu Fei was completely engulfed by the destructive power. However, the crowd was shocked to discover that Gu Fei was still devouring all the power around him. This is crazy. He's committing suicide. How could such a powerful force be dissolved? Even if that cultivator was a quasi-saint, his body would probably explode from the huge amount of energy. What is Master doing? Jiu Zhong couldn't sit still when he saw this scene. Don't be impatient. Your master is using the 4 primordial forces of earth, water, wind, and fire to refine the Azure Dragon's bloodline power. Hei Tian's voice rang out. Azure Dragon had really miscalculated this time. He wanted to kill Gu Fei, but he didn't expect that he would provide 4 powerful primordial forces to Gu Fei instead. The 4 primordial forces of earth, water, fire, and wind were borrowed by Azure Dragon and not his own power. This kind of power could be easily refined by Gu Fei's secret art of returning truth into his own martialist chi and then used to resist the Azure Dragon's bloodline power. Azure Dragon was attacking with all his might, but his attacks were like clay oxen in the sea. He had never thought that he was providing energy to Jiyu Fei. So what if it's the power of the supreme bloodline? Jiyu Fei bellowed. His entire body swelled up as a terrifying and monstrous force collided within his body. If it wasn't for the fact that he cultivated the Ascension secret technique that allowed him to continuously heal his injured body, his martial body would have long exploded from the force within his body. The secret art of Ascension continued to operate. Although Jiyu Fei's martial body was swelled up by the power in his body, his martial body did not explode from the power in his body. How preposterous! Azure Dragon's bloodline power that was sealed in Jiyu Fei's body had a special connection with him. He could feel that the power was gradually weakening. In order to defeat Jiyu Fei, he had used a secret technique to draw out the bloodline power in his body, forming a blood shadow. Only then could he suppress Jiyu Fei. If Jiyu Fei refined the blood shadow, Azure Dragon would lose the power of his bloodline. He would lose any advantage before Jiyu Fei. What was more serious was that if he lost this bloodline power, he did not know when he would be able to recover the bloodline power in his body again. If that happened, his position in the Azure Dragon clan would be replaced by other powerful clansmen. Azure Dragon could not let that happen. He could only be the current Azure Dragon of the Azure Dragon clan. He could not let others shake his position. However, this was a fair battle. He could not use any power other than his own. He knew very well that if he used his holy weapon, his opponent could also use his holy weapon. Just as Jiyu Fei had said, in a fair battle, even if he died in battle, there would be no regrets. However, once this balance was broken, the consequences would be unpredictable. Azure Dragon knew that Jiyu Fei had an extreme holy weapon. Once the cauldron of mountain and river appeared, even if it could not display the power of the extreme holy path, it could still suppress a part of the world. Azure Dragon was also someone with aspirations of the Holy Road. He had the right to be arrogant. Since it was a fair battle, he would die in battle without regrets. Jiyu Fei and Azure Dragon were both like that. They only wanted to fight with their own power. If they relied too much on external power, they would be stuck on the Holy Road in the end, and it would be difficult for them to become supreme experts. At this time, blood-colored divine light continued to rush out of Jiyu Fei's body. However, an extremely powerful aura gradually passed through Jiyu Fei's body. This is, oh no, he is actually using the bloodline power of the Azure Dragon clan to break through. Is he finally going to take that step? The change in Jiyu Fei's body shocked everyone. He had actually sublimated in a battle of life and death, making a breakthrough at the edge of life and death. Using his opponent's power to train himself. Not everyone had this kind of courage. Half-saint. Azure Dragon did not stop. 2 dragon swords appeared in his hands. He bit the tip of his tongue again and spat out a mouthful of blood on the 2 dragon swords. Vroom. In an instant, the markings within the 2 dragon swords were all activated by Azure Dragon's blood. A terrifying holy-level sword chi rippled from the dragon swords. Clang. Chapter 1782. Jiyu Fei and Azure Dragon were both fighting with their lives on the line. At this point, they had no choice but to kill each other even if they wanted to, because they had reached a point where it was either one of them or the other. No one wanted to die, so Azure Dragon wanted to kill Jiyu Fei. A shocking murderous intent rushed out of Azure Dragon's body, and the temperature of the entire area dropped rapidly under the impact of this murderous intent. Clang. The 2 dragon swords that were stained with Azure Dragon's blood vibrated and emitted the most powerful sword chi. Tens of thousands of rays of light illuminated the entire area. At this point, Azure Dragon had no other choice. Swoosh. Tens of thousands of rays of light shot out of Azure Dragon's hands and slashed towards Jiyu Fei. The powerful rays of light tore through the void, as if they were going to split the entire world in half. Master Jiyu Zhong was shocked to see this. The 2 dragon swords were stained with Azure Dragon's blood, and the runes imprinted inside the swords were all activated. A strand of saint-level energy appeared in the air. Azure Dragon pushed the power of the dragon swords to the limit, displaying a trace of saintly might. It was as if a true saint was attacking. It was extremely terrifying. The dragon swords were only divine weapons that Azure Dragon had refined himself, but these two divine swords were extraordinary. They had the potential to transform into holy weapons and already possessed some of the characteristics of holy weapons. Swoosh! Two frightening swordlights tore apart the layer of primordial qi around Ji Yufei's body and flew towards Ji Yufei, who was trapped within the primordial qi. Although Ji Yufei was using his secret arts to protect himself, he was still extremely sensitive to the outside world. The fact that the chaotic aura around him had been torn apart was no small matter. However, his martial body, which had expanded due to the power in his body, was now covered with divine runes of the Great Path. There were even blood-colored ancestral dragon runes faintly visible. Boom! The two rays of light instantly slashed at Ji Yufei's body. It was as if they had slashed at an indestructible piece of divine metal. They were sent flying. What? The Azure Dragon was alarmed. He had already used all his strength in this attack, but he was actually unable to split apart his opponent's martial body. How could his opponent's martial body be so tyrannical? However, the truth was right before his eyes. Azure Dragon had no choice but to believe it. Rumble! After receiving this attack, a thunderous sound suddenly rang out from within Ji Yufei's body. The bloodline power that he had sealed within his body erupted. The Chaos Dao pattern that was imprinted on Ji Yufei's body emitted a dazzling divine light. It drew the power of heaven and earth in the surroundings and suppressed his body. Catcher! The sound of bones breaking rang out. The pressure that Ji Yufei's powerful martial body was enduring at this time was simply indescribable. Even his well-tempered bone body cracked. At this time, Ji Yufei could only make such a sound. His throat was blocked by the energy that was surging out of his body. His eyes bulged out, and it looked like his martial body could explode from the energy in his body at any time. I can't die, Ji Yufei threw caution to the wind. Ascension Secret Technique, Returning Truth Secret Technique, as long as it could save his life, he used all of them. The power of the 9 secrets of the immortal Tao surged in his body. The bloodline power of the Azure Dragon clan was rampaging in his body. His martial body was constantly being injured. Blood seeped out of his pores and dyed his entire body red. Although the bloodline power of the Azure Dragon clan was powerful, if Ji Yufei could survive, his martial body would once again transform and become even more powerful. Under the effect of the Ascension Force, Ji Yufei's injured martial body was rapidly recovering. The destruction and recovery were constantly repeating. The bloodline power of the Azure Dragon clan was destroying the vitality of Ji Yufei's martial body, but the Ascension Force could restore Ji Yufei's martial body. These two forces were constantly fighting against each other. It was like two huge hammers constantly hammering on a piece of divine metal. Ji Yufei's martial body was gradually transforming. No, after sensing the changes in Ji Yufei's body, Azure Dragon was shocked and angry. Ji Yufei was actually using his own power to refine his martial body. This was simply too crazy. However, if Ji Yufei succeeded, the bloodline power that he had painstakingly cultivated would be lost. The bloodline power was sleeping in Azure Dragon's body. It was very difficult to stimulate it, but Azure Dragon managed to do it. However, if he lost the bloodline power that he released, although his bloodline power wouldn't completely disappear, it would take a long time to cultivate it to this level again. Azure Dragon was anxious. He frantically drove the two dragon swords to slash at Ji Yufei. The swordlight formed by the dragon sword soared tens of thousands of feet into the sky, continuously breaking through the layer of primal chaos aura around Ji Yufei's body. However, such a powerful swordlight was unable to truly harm Ji Yufei. Outside the Divine Demon Valley, everyone who saw this scene was stunned. Ji Yufei's martial body was too strong. The two dragon swords could already emit a wisp of saintly might. Some of the quasi-sages present were also terrified. If such terrifying dragon swords were to slash at their bodies would probably be instantly minced by the sword light. How is this possible? Could it be that his body is already strong enough to be comparable to a holy weapon? The powerful physique that Ji Yufei displayed shocked even the old antiques who had lived for countless years. It was hard to believe that there was actually such a strong cultivator in this world. In this great world of the mortal world, anything could happen. A physique that could compete with the martial body of the human race would most likely appear. The Holy Road wouldn't be lonely. There were bound to be intense battles on the Holy Road. Those who were interested in the Holy Road weren't just limited to the younger generation. Those old antiques who had lived for so long would also jump out and compete with the younger generation. Jiyu Fei's strength made those who were interested in the Holy Road feel extremely pressured. No wonder he could beat the younger generation of the southern wilderness into silence hundreds of years ago. The voice of the vermilion bird princess came from the chariot of Li Fire. She was muttering to herself. Hundreds of years ago, Jiyu Fei had already suppressed all the young experts of the southern wilderness. But now, Jiyu Fei could still sweep the entire southern wilderness. One should know that the Azure Dragon represented the strongest battle force in the southern wilderness. If the Azure Dragon was defeated, there would probably not be many in the southern wilderness who could suppress Jiyu Fei. What was even more terrifying was that Jiyu Fei was in the midst of a breakthrough. He was using the power of the Azure Dragon to break through and refine his martial body. The clanging sounds did not stop. At this time, the two dragon swords had already slashed thousands of times, but they still couldn't hurt Jiyu Fei at all. Chapter 1783. Azure Dragon was on the verge of going crazy. He had never expected to encounter such a monstrous opponent. His opponent had even devoured the bloodline power that he had cultivated. Could Jiyu Fei really be his nemesis? Azure Dragon's sword transformed into a sword light that constantly slashed at the bloated guy in front of him. He wanted to withdraw his bloodline power. However, no attack could hurt Jiyu Fei at this time, unless it was the power of a true saint. However, saints were extinct in this world, so it was impossible for a true saint to appear. On Jiyu Fei's body, chaotic Dao patterns interweaved, firmly suppressing the ancestral dragon-like Dao patterns in his body. The four primordial powers of earth, water, wind, and fire were drawn by him and obliterated the ancestral dragon-like Dao patterns. The ancestral dragon-like Dao patterns were condensed from Azure Dragon's bloodline power. It still doesn't work. Jiyu Fei felt that his power was still a bit lacking. He couldn't obliterate the ancestral dragon-like Dao patterns. He couldn't help but feel anxious. If he couldn't obliterate the ancestral dragon-like Dao patterns, then the unlucky one wouldn't be Azure Dragon. The ancestor of the Azure Dragon race was a Supreme Beast Emperor. This was the power of the Supreme Beast Emperor that had been passed on to the current Azure Dragon. The power of the Supreme Bloodline was hard to obliterate. This made Jiyu Fei feel a sense of danger. Outrageous. I still have a trump card that I haven't used yet. But if this move doesn't work, then, at this time, there was no time for Jiyu Fei to think too much. He directly operated the immortal Dao mystic art. A violet divine light shot out from his forehead. Swish. A small figure stepped out from Jiyu Fei's forehead. It was a thumb-sized miniature version of Jiyu Fei. This miniature person looked exactly like Jiyu Fei. How is this possible? How can a cultivator have a primordial spirit? When they saw the little person stepping out from Jiyu Fei's glabella, all the spectators outside the Divine Demon Valley, except for Jiyu Zhong and He Tian, were dumbfounded. Essence Soul. When the Azure Dragon saw a small person walk out from between Jiyu Fei's eyebrows, he was shocked and angry. Since ancient times, he had never heard of a warrior being able to cultivate a primordial spirit. Martial artists cultivated the strength of their bodies. They walked the path of proving their Dao through strength. They did not cultivate their primordial spirit, only cultivating their lives. This was the most difficult path to achieve Dao. Warriors who were truly determined to prove their Dao through strength would not bother to cultivate their primordial spirits. This was because the source of their strength was their physical body, not their primordial spirits. But now, a nascent divinity had emerged from Jiyu Fei's Niwen Palace. That was something that surpassed everyone's understanding, and even the old-timers were shocked. How can a warrior have a primordial spirit? Some of the quasi-sages were confused as well. At that moment, Jiyu Fei's primordial spirit rushed out of his Niwen Palace and entered his body. Soon, an astonishing sword aura erupted from within him. This was one of the 9 secrets of the immortal Dao, the primordial spirit of the Wei sword. The power of Ji Fei's primordial spirit had transformed into a divine sword of the great Tao that could destroy all tangible and intangible things in the world. A great battle was going on inside Ji Fei's body. The primordial spirit of the Wei sword had appeared inside Ji Fei's body. This made the bloodline power of the Azure Dragon in Ji Fei feel a great threat. All of the blood-colored ancestral dragon Tao patterns converged and turned into a faint, blood-colored shadow. Buzz. The Wei sword hummed and pierced through the blood shadow. Some of the ancestral dragon Tao patterns were destroyed by the sword of the great Tao. The primordial spirit of the Wei sword displayed great power. The power contained in the destroyed ancestral dragon Tao patterns was immediately absorbed by Ji Fei's martial body. Damn it! Sensing that the bloodline power in Ji Fei's body was gradually weakening, the Azure Dragon could not help but change. His broken bones were reforming and his flesh was regenerating. A wisp of saintly might was gradually emanating from Ji Fei's body. His flesh, blood, tendons, and bones were transforming. The Chaos Tao patterns that were imprinted on Ji Fei's bones shone with dazzling divine light. The Chaos Tao patterns were devouring the bloodline power of the Azure Dragon clan. Ji Fei's martial body was transforming. The Chaos true power was vast and mighty. This was the Chaos martial body. All the impurities in his body gradually seeped out of Ji Fei's pores. His martial body was transforming into a spotless state. Every drop of blood and every piece of bone was devouring the Chaos true power. The shackles of cultivation seemed to have been broken. The martial body could contain more Chaos true power. The Essence Soul Tao swords could really destroy the ancestral dragon Tao patterns. This surprised and delighted Ji Fei. The secret art created by the Supreme Tao Ancestor had unfathomable divine might. It could even destroy the power of the Paragon bloodline. As such, it would be difficult for people with the Paragon bloodline to threaten Ji Fei. The situation was slightly better. Ji Fei made his move. Clang. He waved his hands and clashed with the two dragon swords over 1,000 times in an instant. The two dragon swords seemed to have been struck by a giant hammer over 1,000 times in an instant and were sent flying away. The two dragon swords were covered with cracks. It seemed like they could shatter at any time. The Azure Dragon's mind was shaken. These two dragon swords were refined from his dragon horns. Moreover, they had a trace of the aura of a sacred weapon. Even a quasi-sage artifact refined by a quasi-sage would not be able to destroy his twin dragon swords. Could it be that Ji Fei's hands were even more terrifying than a quasi-sage artifact? Rumble. A thunderous sound came from Ji Fei's body. His Essence Soul Tao swords were constantly destroying the Azure Dragon's bloodline power. As the bloodline power weakened, his martial body gradually began to recover. Streams of chaos true qi circulated rapidly in Ji Fei's body, fusing into his flesh, blood, and bones. The powerful qi and blood was vast and mighty. There seemed to be a giant dragon looming above Ji Fei's head. This was a strange phenomenon formed when the qi and blood rushed up and penetrated his body. It was a narrow escape. I actually succeeded. On a mountain peak outside the Godfiend Valley, He Tian was muttering to himself. He knew very well that Ji Fei was in a very dangerous state just now. It seemed like his body was about to explode from the power in his body. If the power in his body really exploded, Ji Fei would be destroyed in both body and soul. The bloodline power released by the Azure Dragon was enough to destroy Ji Fei's bones and flesh. Even if he could be reborn from a single drop of blood, it would be useless. Roar! Ji Fei growled. Countless Chaos Tao patterns bloomed with the brightest divine light. In his body, apart from the sound of wind and thunder, there was also the sound of his bones cracking. A sage-level Tao pattern appeared on Ji Fei's body. He broke through. Azure Dragon was truly shocked. To be able to ascend and break through in battle was simply too shocking. Could it be that this was the legendary martial artist? Buzz. The two dragon swords vibrated. The dense cracks on them gradually disappeared. These two divine weapons were really extraordinary. They could repair themselves automatically. The Tao patterns imprinted on them were not damaged. Chapter 1784. Roar. Ji Fei roared at the sky. His voice shook the 9 heavens and the entire valley cracked. Countless baleful blood marks were activated, sealing the void. In the sky above the Godfiend Valley, an incomparably huge demonic shadow appeared. This was a demonic shadow condensed from the demonic laws of the Godfiend Valley. It was faint and illusory. At this moment, even the leaders of the demons were incomparably shocked. Could the ancient legends be true? Did an unparalleled demonic ancestor really fall in that place? Baleful blood chi was vast and mighty. Beams of demonic light shot out from the ground of the Godfiend Valley. It seemed like something was about to rush out from the depths of the Godfiend Valley. This caused everyone to be shocked. Could it be that there was a powerful demonic creature hiding in the depths? This valley had existed for too long. No one knew what had happened here in the distant past. Buzz. Just as the demonic shadow appeared, the figure that had been sitting cross-legged in the sky moved at this moment. The yin-yang diagram emitted a mighty force. Bang! The void trembled. Under the suppression of the yin-yang diagram, the demonic shadow dissipated in the void. In the depths of the Godfiend Valley, there was a powerful demonic force that wanted to rush out. But very quickly, this demonic force retreated. The fierce man from the extreme north made his move, shocking the demonic force in the depths of the Godfiend Valley. Ji Fei, I don't believe that I will lose to you again. At this moment, Azure Dragon's eyes turned red. He held 2 dragon swords in his hands and directly rushed towards Ji Fei. The power of the true dragon was vast and mighty. The dragon swords hummed. Azure Dragon threw caution to the wind. His entire body seemed to be on fire. The power of the true dragon rose and danced on Azure Dragon's body like divine flames. Buzz. The dragon swords hummed. The tip of the sword streaked across the void at high speed. The void was directly torn apart. Wherever the dragon swords passed, 2 pitch-black spatial cracks were left. Swoosh. The Azure Dragon attacked with all his might. The powerful true dragon force was unprecedentedly strong. The 2 dragon swords directly split apart the chaotic aura around Ji Fei's body, and then pierced towards the center of his brows. The Mudpill Palace was located between the eyebrows. As long as Ji Fei's Mudpill Palace was broken, the power of his primordial spirit would be greatly reduced, and it would be difficult for him to use that supreme secret technique again. Inside Ji Fei's body, a crucial battle was taking place. The primordial spirit Dao sword was clashing, and the blood-colored figure was constantly being destroyed by the primordial spirit Dao sword. The blood-colored figure that Ji Fei had sealed in his body gradually dimmed, as if it could dissipate at any time. Ding! At this moment, the tip of the dragon swords instantly pierced the center of Ji Fei's brows. The 2 dragon swords both hit their target, but a scene that shocked the Azure Dragon happened. The 2 dragon swords actually could not pierce the center of Ji Fei's brows. The bodies of the 2 dragon swords were bent. No matter how hard the Azure Dragon tried to inject the true dragon force in his body into the dragon swords, the 2 dragon swords in his hands could not even cut through the skin of Ji Fei. How can this be? The Azure Dragon was completely stunned. The divine weapons that he had refined could not even pierce through the skin of his opponent. This was simply too unbelievable. Ji Fei was only a pinnacle mighty figure. How could there be a pinnacle mighty figure in this world with such a strong physical body? It was impossible. Even if Ji Fei was a warrior, it was still impossible. However, the truth was enough to explain everything. Swoosh. A dazzling divine light shot out from Ji Fei's eyes. The divine light seemed to have materialized and swept towards the Azure Dragon, causing him to have no choice but to retreat. His martial body that had been tempered hundreds and thousands of times was about to break through to another realm at this moment. The aura of the sage realm lingered around. Although he was not a sage, he already possessed some of the characteristics of a sage. Ji Fei's martial body was transforming into a sage martial body. As his martial body was transforming, even Ji Fei's primordial spirit was becoming stronger. Swoosh. Within Ji Fei's body, the primordial spirit Dao sword was rampaging, constantly destroying the ancestral dragon Dao patterns. The power contained in the ancestral dragon Tao patterns was constantly being absorbed by his martial body. His martial body was getting stronger and stronger, but the bloodline power released by the Azure Dragon was getting weaker and weaker. Under such circumstances, it was only a matter of time before the bloodline power was destroyed. Azure Dragon, you should just admit defeat. Ji Fei already had the absolute advantage. Once the primordial spirit Tao sword completely destroyed the bloodline power in his body, he would be able to free up his hands to deal with the Azure Dragon. Rays of primal chaos divine light circled around Ji Fei's body, causing everyone to feel an immense pressure. Heavenly tribulation. The entire world seemed to be pressing down. The atmosphere was so oppressive that it was suffocating. Some people could feel that there was a power gathering in the sky. Tribulation clouds began to gather in the sky above the Godfiend Valley. Is he really going to break through to the Sage Realm? Everyone who was watching the battle was shocked. This Ji Fei was too crazy. He actually went through the tribulation under such circumstances. He was simply courting death. Boom! A dazzling bolt of lightning appeared in the sky, illuminating the dark world for a moment. This was the might of heaven and earth. As long as one was not a sage, they would forever be bound by the great Tao of heaven and earth. It really is the heavenly tribulation. Anyone who could enter the demon domain and come to the valley of gods and demons was no weakling. All of the powerful beings present had felt the ripples of the might of heaven and earth. In fact, many of them had even gone through multiple heavenly tribulations. As for those old antiques, they were extremely familiar with the power of the heavenly tribulation. One must know that in the distant past, the laws of heaven and earth had yet to change. If a cultivator wanted to break through a bottleneck, they would definitely be sensed by the heavenly Tao and send down a heavenly tribulation. But now that the human realm had arrived, the laws of heaven and earth had changed once more. The great Tao of heaven and earth was no longer ethereal and could be touched. And when a cultivator wanted to break through a bottleneck, the heavenly tribulation would descend. This was a form of training for a cultivator. But at the same time, it was also a tribulation that concerned one's life and death. If one couldn't pass through the heavenly tribulation, there would only be one outcome: death in body and soul. Most people would prepare everything beforehand before summoning the heavenly tribulation. Nobody would be like Ji Fei, summoning the heavenly tribulation while he was still in the midst of breaking through. The Azure Dragon retreated immediately. He did not want to be dragged into the heavenly tribulation by Ji Fei. If you can survive, I'll admit defeat. The Azure Dragon rushed out of the Valley of Gods and Demons. Ji Fei was about to undergo his heavenly tribulation. If Ji Fei could pass it, then he would definitely not be a match for Ji Fei. But if Ji Fei couldn't pass this heavenly tribulation, his body and soul would be destroyed by it. At that time, the Azure Dragon would still be the current Azure Dragon of the Azure Dragon clan. Very well. Ji Fei's voice rang out from the Valley of Gods and Demons. His tone was filled with confidence. No one could have imagined that the battle would develop to this point. Ji Fei was really about to make a breakthrough. The heavenly tribulation was brewing high up in the sky, and dazzling bolts of lightning kept appearing in the tribulation clouds. Chapter 1785. Ji Fei had broken through and transformed at the edge of life and death. He was a martial artist, a natural-born god of war. The heavenly tribulation of the half-sacred realm was incomparable to that of an ordinary heavenly tribulation of the half-sacred realm. The tribulation clouds gathered above the valley of the demons from all directions, shrouding the entire heaven and earth. The destructive power was brewing as the tribulation clouds continued to spread. In the end, half of the demon domain was shrouded by the tribulation clouds. It was too shocking. The power of the heavenly tribulation forced all the experts in the vicinity of the Valley of the Demons to retreat, afraid of being implicated by it. The heavenly Tao could sense it and send down the heavenly tribulation. This kind of feeling could also trigger the heavenly tribulation of other cultivators, which was not a good thing. Even the figure sitting on the yin-yang diagram had instantly left the area shrouded by the tribulation clouds and appeared at the edge of the demon domain. The fierce man from the extreme north didn't do anything special. He didn't excessively provoke the demons either. It seemed like this fierce man also had some concerns. Because this was only a clone of the fierce man, it couldn't be compared to his real body. The demon domain in the 100,000 mountain range was the origin of demons between heaven and earth. Legend had it that the most ancient demon was sleeping here. Obviously, the fierce man from the extreme north didn't want to disturb such an existence at this time. Rumble, dull thunder sounds resounded. The black tribulation clouds in the sky almost touched the ground. Huge lightning bolts the size of mountains dashed out from the tribulation clouds, tearing apart the void of heaven and earth, wreaking havoc in the sky above the valley of the demons. The destructive power spread across the heaven and earth. The might of heaven and earth shook the entire place. Countless demons fled into the depths of the demon domain, seeking the protection of the demons there. They didn't dare to expose themselves to the heavenly tribulation. This human, a few figures appeared in the depths of the demons. The successor of the martial progenitor. An old demon sensed the fluctuation of martial Dao true force from Jiyu Fei and couldn't help but be startled. A supreme martial progenitor was an invincible existence. Countless demons had died under his fists. This human can't be left alive, one of the demon race's powerhouses said. However, the other leaders of the demons did not respond because the fierce man from the far north had locked onto them. If they dared to attack Jiyu Fei, the fierce man from the far north would certainly not sit idly by. The strength of that fierce man from the extreme north was obvious to all. Just a while ago, a leader of the demons was crippled by this fierce man and was almost beheaded on the spot. With this as an example, how could the demons dare to act rashly? Roar! Jiyu Fei roared. He could sense the extremely powerful destructive power of the heavenly tribulation. This power was stronger than all the heavenly tribulations he had faced before. At this moment, his condition was truly terrible. The azure dragon bloodline power sealed in his body had yet to be completely destroyed, and the heavenly tribulation had descended. Even someone as powerful as Jiyu Fei felt a great deal of pressure due to the internal and external troubles. The chaotic true force was constantly strengthening. The bloodline power released by the azure dragon was gradually absorbed by Jiyu Fei's martial body and transformed into his martial Dao true force. The chaotic Dao pattern on his body was getting brighter and brighter. The chaotic true force was constantly tempering his martial body. The Dao pattern was branded into every inch of his bones and flesh. The impurities in his body were constantly being discharged from his pores. Even his blood was seeping out. The blood in his body was transforming, becoming brighter, and the vitality it contained became stronger. Changing blood, changing bones, Jiyu Fei's martial body was undergoing a complete transformation. He had taken that step and his martial body was transforming into the sacred martial body. However, this was a long process. He had taken this step and the sacred martial body would appear sooner or later. This required time. The strength of the half-sacred martial body had already been verified. Even the dragon sword refined by the azure dragon could not pierce through Jiyu Fei's skin. It could not break through Jiyu Fei's defense. Rumble, the tribulation clouds continued to press down. A terrifying destructive force was approaching Jiyu Fei. The half-sacred heavenly tribulation was about to begin. The entire God-Devil Valley was enveloped by tribulation clouds. There seemed to be several indistinct figures within the pitch-black tribulation clouds. This, Jiyu Fei couldn't help being shocked. Such powerful tribulation clouds definitely couldn't have any life. It was filled with destructive power. Only a saint could ignore the threat of the heavenly tribulation. Heavenly tribulation phenomenon. Some of the old antiques also noticed the changes in the tribulation clouds. They were incomparably shocked. They had never imagined that the legendary heavenly tribulation would appear in front of them. Legend had it that in the distant past, there were heaven-defying characters who could trigger heavenly tribulation phenomena when they underwent their tribulation. Who would have thought that it was true? This was too shocking. Those who could trigger heavenly tribulation phenomena were all heaven-defying characters who had the qualifications to contend for the throne of the world's supreme experts. Come. Jiyu Fei completely released his powerful aura, causing a strand of saints' might to appear in the heavens and earth. The moment this strand of saints' might appeared, A huge figure charged out from the tribulation clouds in the sky and pounced towards Jiu Fei. Even Jiu Fei was stunned. This was a dragon formed from interweaving lightning. It was incomparably real, and its draconic might shook heaven and earth. 4 primordial spirits. The moment Jiu Fei saw the dragon, he immediately understood what it was. It was an azure dragon formed by the power of the heavenly way. The appearance of this azure dragon shocked even the members of the Azure Dragon clan. There was nothing more to say. Jiu Fei directly attacked, and a powerful force slammed into the incoming azure dragon. Boom! The void trembled as Jiu Fei's fist blocked the incoming azure dragon. Moreover, the head of the azure dragon formed from the heavenly Daos exploded. Dragon blood splattered everywhere. Tens of thousands of lightning bolts exploded, illuminating the entire dark world. The heavenly tribulation had just begun and he was already met with such a powerful attack. This forced Jiu Fei to be cautious. He didn't want to die just like that. Damned heavens, what can you do to me? Jiu Fei roared. His blood and bones were transforming, and his chaotic martial body was gradually forming. The heavenly Daos sensed that the heavenly tribulation was about to begin. Bang! Another beast rushed out of the tribulation clouds. It was a vermilion bird, and it was surrounded by boundless flames. The moment the vermilion bird appeared, flames burned the sky. The 4 primordial spirits all jumped out of the tribulation clouds and attacked Jiu Fei. Boom! A golden hand struck from below. The power of the metal element was vast, and the 4 primordial spirits were all blown away. The powerful shockwave even destroyed some of the blood Dao patterns in the valley. What? Chapter 1786. Jiu Fei had triggered the heavenly tribulation of a half-step saint. This was a heavenly tribulation so powerful that it made everyone's heart palpitate. This was not an ordinary heavenly tribulation. The endless tribulation lightning had condensed into the 4 ancient divine beasts. They were the legendary supreme divine beasts born from the heavens and earth. Legend had it that the 4 ancient clans of the southern wilderness were the descendants of the 4 ancient divine beasts. The blood of the 4 ancient divine beasts flowed in their veins. This kind of bloodline was hidden in the disciples of the 4 ancient clans. This kind of heavenly tribulation has only appeared a few times since ancient times. Some old antiques murmured. The heavenly tribulation that Jiu Fei had triggered was too terrifying. This was the most powerful and terrifying heavenly tribulation among all the heavenly tribulations. This was a manifestation of the will of the heavens and earth. The 4 ancient divine beasts were carnate divine beasts. They were supreme existences born from the heavens and earth. This was why the heavenly Dao could send down such a heavenly tribulation. To a certain extent, all carnate lifeforms were inextricably linked to the heavenly Dao. All carnate lifeforms that had appeared before would leave their mark on the heavenly Dao. If these carnate lifeforms were to die, there would only be one outcome. They would return to the heavenly Dao. Jiu Fei was extremely powerful. Even though the heavenly Dao had sent down such a heavenly tribulation, he did not retreat. His battle intent was still as strong as before. So what if it was the heavenly Dao? There was no hesitation, no retreat, and no fear. Right now, Jiu Fei was fighting the heavens and challenging the heavens in order to survive. The heavenly Dao had sensed this and sent down a heavenly tribulation that made all cultivators despair. If it was any other cultivator, they would have lost the courage to resist the heavenly tribulation. However, Jiu Fei was different. The stronger the heavenly tribulation, the more power his martial body could unleash. Of course, the strength of the 4 ancient divine beasts formed from the tribulation lightning was only on par with Jiu Fei. The heavenly Dao was heartless, but there was still a chance of survival. Roar! The azure dragon divine beast roared. This azure dragon that was condensed from tribulation lightning seemed to be even stronger than the azure dragon's bloodline power. It was like a real ancient azure dragon had descended. With a single roar, the entire world shook. The 4 primordial spiritual beasts seemed to be living beings with flesh and blood. Even the scales on their bodies could be seen clearly, and a towering dragon might filled the sky. How is this possible? Is this the power of the Azure Dragon Patriarch? Quite a few experts from the Azure dragon race had also arrived. When they sensed the dragon roars coming from the heavenly tribulation, their expressions changed. The other ancient race experts were the same. In the center of the heavenly tribulation, the vermilion bird, the white tiger, and the black tortoise's power rippled out, shocking the heavens. They were the ancestors of the four great ancient clans, the supreme divine beasts of the mythological era. This is unbelievable. Even the experts of the four great ancient clans found it difficult to become supremes. How could the heavenly tribulation that Gu Fei had triggered have the fluctuations of their ancestors' power? It must be known that the ancestors of the four great ancient clans had already disappeared during the desolate times. Kill. A loud roar sounded out from the center of the tribulation as a shocking battle intent exploded out, causing the heavens and earth to change color. This was Gu Fei's boundless battle intent. He wanted to challenge the heavens and break the legend. Roar. The four great ancient beasts roared as well. They seemed to have a life of their own, as though they could feel the threat that Gu Fei posed to them. At the same time, they pounced towards Gu Fei. Gu Fei soared into the sky and began fighting against the four great ancient beasts. At this time, the bloodline power in his body also rose up, making a final struggle. His Yuan spirit Dao sword heavily injured that power. Under the attacks from both inside and outside, Gu Fei's martial body was almost crippled. Blood constantly dripped from his body. However, he was an unyielding warrior and still fought with his life on the line. Bang! His fist landed on the huge body of the Azure dragon. The dragon scales shattered and dragon blood splattered everywhere. This scene was incomparably real, as though it wasn't an illusion. The Azure dragon was sent flying by Gu Fei's fist. That 30,000-meter-long dragon body was almost broken as it was heavily injured. And just as Gu Fei sent the Azure dragon flying, the vermilion bird and the white tiger rushed over. Towering divine flames instantly engulfed Gu Fei, wanting to turn Gu Fei into ashes. Gu Fei allowed the divine flames to engulf his body. He didn't block them at all. He was actually guiding the vermilion bird divine flames to temper his martial body. Countless chaos Dao patterns appeared on his body. Traces of fire energy seeped into his body through his pores, tempering his muscles, bones, blood, and flesh. The white tiger divine wind howled angrily. If one was hit by that divine wind, even a peak-stage mighty figure would be destroyed in body and soul. Formless astral winds swept through the void, leaving behind pitch-black spatial cracks. This was simply like an invisible heavenly blade chopping down. The wind increased the intensity of the flames. The vermilion bird divine flames burned the entire world red. Flames soared into the sky, and terrifying heat spread out. This place was like an oven. Even those who were thousands of miles away could feel the scorching heat waves constantly assaulting their bodies. It was truly hard to imagine what would happen to Gu Fei within the divine flames. Even if divine metal was thrown into the divine flames, it would still be burned into smoke. Master Jiu Zhong couldn't help but worry when he saw this scene. However, he believed that his master wouldn't die so easily. A mere heavenly tribulation wouldn't be able to do anything to him. Boss Jiu can't come. If he can successfully pass the tribulation, I'm afraid very few people in this world can be his opponent. He Tian sighed in admiration. The heavenly tribulation that Gu Fei triggered was too rare. There were only a few people who could trigger such a heavenly tribulation since ancient times. Moreover, those few people eventually became the strongest existences in this world. From He Tian's point of view, Gu Fei had limitless potential. He even had the qualifications to contend for the supreme throne. However, all of this required time. Boom! Suddenly, the monstrous fire exploded. The endless fire dissipated like ice and snow, turning into flame essences that frantically converged towards a figure in the sea of fire. How delightful! In the sea of flames, Gu Fei bathed in the divine flames. His entire body was glowing. The power of the vermilion bird was guided into his body and absorbed by his martial physique. What? Seeing this scene, everyone was stunned. Not only was the power of the vermilion bird absorbed by Gu Fei's martial physique, even the power of the white tiger was no exception. Even the black tortoise was riding on Jiyu Fei's back. The power of the azure dragon was also shaken. Right now, Jiyu Fei's martial physique was like a bottomless black hole that was devouring spiritual energy from all directions. This was a scene that everyone would never be able to forget for the rest of their lives. The four great ancient supreme divine beasts were actually struggling, wanting to escape. However, the four great divine beasts were being sucked in by a heaven-devouring power, unable to escape at all. His devouring the power of the heavenly tribulation. This is insane. Everyone who witnessed this scene was dumbfounded and shocked to the extreme. Jiyu Fei's actions were truly unbelievable. He actually wanted to devour such a powerful heavenly tribulation. At this moment, Jiyu Fei was in a difficult situation. He had no choice but to do this because he wanted to trigger the power of the heavenly tribulation to destroy the bloodline power in his body. The effect of this was obvious. After the power of the four ancient divine beasts surged into Jiyu Fei's body, it immediately suppressed the bloodline power. Especially the power of the azure dragon. It actually resonated with the bloodline power in Jiyu Fei's body, devouring the bloodline power. Although the azure dragon formed by the heavenly tribulation was just a mark, the bloodline power was the source energy. It actually fused with the mark. This was something that Jiyu Fei never expected. The bloodline power of the azure dragon was dissolved just like that. This made Jiyu Fei feel a little unreal. This was too easy. After the power of the azure dragon fused with the bloodline power, it instantly became stronger. However, this true dragon power was immediately suppressed by Jiyu Fei. Buzz. The primordial spirit Dao sword slashed out and killed the four ancient beasts in the void. Four imprints shot up into the sky and disappeared in the sky. It was as if the four ancient beasts had never appeared before. Rumble. The power of the heavenly tribulation was still increasing. It didn't show any signs of stopping just because Jiyu Fei killed the four ancient beasts. Powerful silhouettes appeared once again in the lightning tribulation. The marks left behind by other carnate lifeforms. Jiyu Fei couldn't help but be moved when he saw those silhouettes in the heavenly tribulation. Was he fighting against carnate lifeforms of the past? This was too crazy. Carnate lifeforms were incomparably powerful when they were born. If the heavenly tribulation evolved all the carnate lifeforms, even Jiyu Fei would probably be exhausted to death by this tactic of overwhelming numbers. One must know that the number of carnate lifeforms born in the world was definitely a number that would make Jiyu Fei feel despair. This is, those silhouettes walked out of the tribulation clouds. They were 12 faint and illusory silhouettes, but each of them emitted a powerful half-saint aura. 12 half-saint carnate lifeforms. Jiyu Fei's pupils shrank. This wasn't the true body of the carnate lifeforms, but a mark that the carnate lifeforms had imprinted on the heavenly Tao. Although it wasn't their true bodies, the ripples of power that emanated from these 12 silhouettes shocked Jiyu Fei. None of the carnate lifeforms that could leave their mark on the heavenly Tao were weak. They were all heaven-defying geniuses. Even one of these opponents was enough to give Jiyu Fei a headache. Not to mention that there were 12 of them. Damn the heavens, Jiyu Fei didn't retreat. His battle intent was raised to the limit. At this time, the bloodline power in his body had been dissolved. He could finally attack without any reservations. This is, the experts outside the range of the heavenly tribulation saw this scene and broke out in cold sweat for Jiyu Fei. They could already see that the 12 silhouettes that walked out of the tribulation clouds were all extremely powerful. Chapter 1787. The appearance of the 12 made Jiyu Fei feel an incredible pressure. This pressure was far greater than what the 4 primordial beasts had felt. Boundless tribulation lightning power seemed to converge on the 12 figures, causing terrifying fluctuations to spread out. Even some of the old-timers who saw what was happening were flabbergasted. Of the 12 Xiantian lifeforms formed from the power of tribulation lightning, some were humanoid, while others were strange. However, all of them had one thing in common, and that was that they were powerful. 12 indistinct figures walked out of the tribulation clouds, their powerful auras causing heaven and earth to tremble. These 12 were all half-saints. The aura of the sage Tao was vast and mighty, shaking heaven and earth. This was the will of the heavenly Taos. If Jiyu Fei wanted to become a half-saint, he was challenging the heavenly Taos. The heavenly Taos wouldn't let Jiyu Fei become a half-saint so easily. Ordinary people would have long since given up when the 12 carnate life forms appeared in the midst of the tribulation. The heavenly Tao's brand was far too powerful to resist. This is a sure-death situation. One of the old-timers said. Even a true half-saint would most likely be turned to ash by the heavenly tribulation. It would be very difficult for Jiyu Fei to take this step. He could die at any moment, but he had no other way out. Die. The 9 esoteric secrets of the immortal Tao revolved furiously, pushing Jiyu Fei's combat prowess to the limit. He shot into the sky, attacking the 12 figures. Boom. An intense battle erupted. Jiyu Fei clashed head-on with one of the carnate life forms, causing the void to shatter and the explosive power to reach the heavens. Jiyu Fei and the carnate life form were both sent flying. That's just a brand of the heavenly Tao. Jiyu Fei was incomparably shocked. These carnate life forms weren't true bodies, but just brands branded into the heavenly Taos. And yet, they were still incomparably powerful. In a battle of the same level, not a single one of them was weaker than Jiyu Fei. Living beings born from the world were already blessed by the heavens. Carnate life forms had a much higher starting point than other living beings. Some carnate life forms were already comparable to immortals and gods the moment they were born. The 12 carnate life forms were definitely the most powerful beings in all of history. Otherwise, they wouldn't have left their imprints on the heavenly Taos. Rumble. The other Xiantian life forms made their moves, and a terrifying half-step saint-level power enveloped Jiyu Fei in an instant. An intense battle broke out, and Jiyu Fei encountered the most dangerous heavenly tribulation he had ever faced since he started cultivating. Everyone was stunned. That place was covered by the power of the heavenly Tao, so no one could see what was happening inside. Only a saint could ignore the heavenly Tao. Master, you must survive. Yi Futian said. On the mountain peak, Jiyu Zhong clenched his fists. This great tribulation was too powerful. It had greatly affected him. He wondered if he would also trigger this tribulation when he tried to break through to the half-step saint realm. He Tian stood beside Jiyu Zhong. At this moment, he had already put away his frivolous demeanor, and his expression had become incomparably solemn. He activated the yin-yang divine eyes, but it was useless. Even the yin-yang divine eyes couldn't see into the battle. The space there was covered by the power of the heavenly Tao. Unless one became a saint, everyone was just an ant under the power of the heavenly Tao. And cultivators were just ants that were a little stronger than other ants. Bang! Jiyu Fei's martial body exploded. It was destroyed by the joint attack of the few carnate life forms. His broken flesh and bones seemed to be burning. However, before Jiyu Fei's martial body was destroyed, a carnate life form created by the heavenly Tao was torn in half by him. Blood splattered everywhere. All of this seemed so real, as if what Jiyu Fei had torn apart was a real carnate life form with flesh and blood. As long as my battle intent is not extinguished, my soul shall not be extinguished. Jiyu Fei's divine will spread out. The countless pieces of his martial body quickly gathered together. Chaotic Tao runes interweaved as a figure appeared under the heavenly tribulation. After paying the price of having his martial body destroyed, Jiyu Fei had successfully killed a carnate life form. However, there were still 11 carnate life forms staring at him. Again. The Heaven Ascension secret art was activated. Jiyu Fei's injured martial body instantly recovered to its peak state. Swoosh. A humanoid carnate life form made his move. A large number of destructive Tao runes rushed out from his hands, imprinting themselves on the sky. In the blink of an eye, the void around Jiyu Fei was sealed by the Tao runes. The sealed void seemed to have solidified into a piece of godly metal. This, Jiyu Fei could feel the changes in the space around him. He couldn't help but be moved. These carnate life forms could actually use the mystic arts they cultivated when they were in the half-step saint realm. Boom! The space that was sealed by the humanoid carnate life form suddenly shattered into thousands of pieces. They looked like transparent ice cubes. Jiyu Fei's martial body also shattered. This mystic art, Ji Fei's heart trembled. This was using the destructive power of the shattered space to kill the opponent in an instant. Roar! Ji Fei roared. Countless chaotic Tao runes rushed out from his shattered flesh and bones, dispersing the destructive power of the void. The powerful martial body was hard to destroy. In just a few breaths' time, Ji Fei's shattered body reformed. Bang! Ji Fei immediately made his move. He attacked that humanoid carnate lifeform. At this time, the other carnate lifeforms joined the battle again. They could feel Ji Fei's strength and wanted to join forces to kill Ji Fei. Ji Fei's blood was becoming more and more vigorous. The Tao runes he had comprehended were changing. Countless Tao runes started to regroup. Finally, only 9 Tao runes were left. With 9 chaotic Tao runes imprinted on his body, Ji Fei was like a god of war, fighting against the 11 figures. He didn't know how many times his martial body had been shattered. Each time, he could use the Heaven Ascension secret art to recover. It had to be said that this secret art was truly heaven-defying. If it wasn't for this secret art, Ji Fei would probably be in danger. After his martial body was destroyed once, the reconstructed martial body would be slightly stronger. The martial body's power was gradually released. The human body's treasures were endless. Roar! Ji Fei kept roaring. This heavenly tribulation was too powerful and abnormal. His primordial spirit had been shattered countless times. However, under the power of the Heaven Ascension secret art, the shattered primordial spirit reformed again and again. Buzz! In the end, Ji Fei's glabella emitted a dazzling divine light. The void trembled. A small figure sat cross-legged in his Niwen palace. It was like a sovereign of the immortal Tao. Its entire body was radiating with immortal light. Similarly, 9 Tao runes appeared on Ji Fei's primordial spirit. Chapter 1788. Ji Fei was the first person in history to combine both the immortal path and the martial path. There had never been such a person before. Of course, it was not that there were no dual cultivators. However, most of these people found it difficult to truly grow up, and it was difficult for the world to know of their existence. And Ji Fei was definitely the only immortal cultivator who had achieved success. However, in Ji Fei's view, he was still a cultivator. The immortal path was only a supplementary function to him, not his foundation. Buzz! A blinding divine light shot out from Ji Fei's brow, and a violet gold sword aura soared into the sky. Everyone felt this fluctuation and a chill. Swish! A violet gold divine sword rushed out from Ji Fei's Niwen palace. This was a sword formed from his primordial spirit, a divine sword of the Great Path. The sword light shot up into the sky and slashed at the 11 blurry figures. A carnate lifeform was cleaved in half by the primordial spirit Tao sword and dissipated into the void. Roar! The remaining 10 figures sensed the danger. Like true carnate lifeforms of flesh and blood, they let out angry roars and charged at Ji Fei. Clang! Endless tribulation lightning turned into a chaotic divine saber that cut through the void and slashed at Ji Fei. The terrifying saber light was no weaker than Ji Fei's primordial spirit Tao sword. Ji Fei's eyes narrowed when he saw this. This was a great technique from a carnate lifeform, and it was very frightening. It called upon the chaotic power of heaven and earth. These carnate lifeforms were all extremely powerful. Even in the half-saint realm, they were powerful enough to sweep through an area. They were the kings of half-saints, invincible in the same realm. Come at me. Ji Fei was a natural warrior. The stronger his opponent was, the more his fighting spirit would be aroused. He had an invincible heart, and no one could shake his Tao heart. Buzz! The primordial soul Tao sword sent out countless sword lights, blocking all the chaos saber chi. The chaos divine saber and the primordial soul Tao sword clashed rapidly. In the blink of an eye, Ji Fei's primordial Tao sword had clashed with the chaos divine saber conjured by the carnate lifeform no less than 10,000 times. The entire void was torn to shreds by the sword light and saber energy. Even the other Xiantian lifeforms were affected by the shockwaves and fled far away. Chaos fist. Ji Fei soared into the sky, directly pouncing towards the Xiantian lifeform. His fists continuously smashed through the blade chi of primal chaos as he charged towards the Xiantian lifeform. Kill. Ji Fei unleashed his strongest punch. The fist force was so violent that it shook the heavens. This punch definitely had the power to break the heavens. 9 primal chaos Dao patterns appeared on Ji Fei's fist. Bam! The Xiantian lifeform also punched out, meeting Ji Fei's attack head-on. Boom! The two fists instantly collided, causing a loud explosion. The earth-shattering collision caused the void within a radius of 1,000 miles to be annihilated. The remaining 9 figures were all swallowed up by the annihilated void. This collision even shook the heavenly tribulation of the half-sage. The tribulation clouds that covered a radius of a few thousand miles were actually dispersed by half, and the power of the heavenly tribulation was greatly weakened. Ji Fei and the Xiantian lifeform were moving at high speed, fighting in the annihilated void. Drops of blood splattered out. This was the battle blood in Ji Fei's body. The 9 figures of the Xiantian lifeforms that were swallowed up by the chaotic void were also closing in on Ji Fei. The heavenly tribulation was about to end. However, some people could already tell that the power of the heavenly tribulation was no longer able to suppress Ji Fei. A half-sage was about to appear in the world. This was one of the few newly advanced half-sages in this world. In the past 100 years, only the Azure Dragon of the 4 ancient clans of the southern wilderness and a few others had reached the half-sage realm. After a few hours, an extremely weak aura of the divine path appeared in the world. No one knew what had happened in the heavenly tribulation. Ji Fei did not die, and the tribulation clouds in the sky began to disperse. Let's go. He Tian and Ji Zhong rushed over before the tribulation clouds had completely dispersed. In fact, with the incarnation of the extreme north guarding this place, no one dared to attack Ji Fei. However, He Tian and Ji Zhong did not care about this. He actually survived. Even though he survived, he is most likely half dead. It will not be easy for him to recover. We have to eliminate him when he is at his weakest. No one dared to act rashly. The incarnation of the extreme north was still there. Attacking Ji Fei at this time was undoubtedly a challenge to the extreme north's dignity. Rumble. The shattered space gradually repaired itself under the effect of the power of the world. Within 1,000 miles of the battlefield, there were terrifying spatial holes everywhere. Even the sky and earth were pierced and torn. From this, one could see how fierce the battle between Ji Fei and the 12 carnate lifeforms was. The air was filled with the smell of blood. The carnate lifeforms formed by the power of the heavenly tribulation could not have a body of flesh and blood. The smell of blood here meant that it was Ji Fei's blood. Master Ji Zhong and He Tian sensed a weak aura of life. They followed the aura and found Ji Fei. At this time, Ji Fei was extremely miserable. His body was broken, and only his head was intact. Next to his forehead, there was a bloody hole that was oozing blood. The broken pieces of his body floated around Ji Fei's head. Even though Ji Fei had cultivated the heaven transformation secret technique, he could only gather the broken pieces of his body around his head. It was difficult for him to reassemble his body. His weak to this extent. Ji Zhong and He Tian couldn't help being shocked when they sensed Ji Fei's state. This was a narrow escape. If the bloody hole on Ji Fei's forehead had been a little more to the side, his Niwen palace would have been pierced. Of course, Ji Fei was a cultivator. Even if his Niwen palace was pierced, his life wouldn't be in danger. However, the Niwen palace was where the primordial spirit resided. Once it was pierced, the primordial spirit inside would definitely be scattered. At the final juncture of the heavenly tribulation, Ji Fei couldn't even reform his martial body, let alone his primordial spirit. If his primordial spirit was scattered, Ji Fei's immortal Dao primordial spirit would be destroyed. At this time, Ji Fei's immortal Dao primordial spirit was sleeping in his Niwen palace. Ji Fei's martial body and primordial spirit were both heavily injured. It was definitely not an exaggeration to say that he had a slim chance of survival. Ji Fei had almost died. It was almost impossible to defeat the 12 carnate lifeforms one by one. However, Ji Fei still managed to accomplish such an impossible feat. Let's go. He Tian opened his inner world and put Ji Fei's head and broken body into it. Then, he took out the teleportation formation and directly boarded it with Ji Zhong. They moved through the void and left. Chapter 1789. Ji Fei's survival was a miracle in everyone's eyes. Such a heavenly tribulation was rare since ancient times, and the number of times it had appeared could be counted on one's fingers. However, Ji Fei had managed to carve out a path of survival in the face of such a deadly heavenly tribulation. He had firmly grasped the slim chance of survival. However, even though he had survived, Ji Fei's life aura had weakened to the extreme, and he could only preserve a tiny bit of his true spirit. It would not be easy for him to recover. No one could have imagined that the battle between Ji Fei and Azure Dragon would develop to this point. Ji Fei had actually sublimated in the middle of the battle and attracted the heavenly tribulation of a half-step saint. Taking this step was extremely difficult. No one knew better than those old fogies who had been stuck at the peak of the almighty realm for their entire lives. Half-step saints had the word saint attached to them, and they were on two different levels compared to peak almighties. Half-step saints could easily kill peak almighties. Some people would find it difficult to take this step in their entire lives, and they would remain peak almighties until they died. However, Ji Fei had successfully taken this step. Moreover, he was a martial artist, and once he took this step, there would not be many half-step saints in the same realm who could be his opponent. Even Azure Dragon would find it difficult to suppress Ji Fei. Moreover, the bloodline power that Azure Dragon had stimulated had been obliterated by Ji Fei. At this time, Azure Dragon might not even be able to maintain his position in the Azure Dragon clan. The heavenly tribulation ended, and the crowd gradually dispersed. That fierce man from the extreme north also left. Half a day later, the experts of the demons slowly approached the battlefield. The shattered void hadn't been completely restored, and there was primal chaos energy seeping out from the pitch-black chaos. Seeing this scene, even the demons' leader's expression changed. That heavenly tribulation was too terrifying. It had actually destroyed the void to such an extent. This kind of heavenly tribulation was probably the strongest heavenly tribulation of a half-step saint. Ji Fei survived. This result made Ji Fei's enemies very uneasy. They knew that once Ji Fei recovered, they would be out of luck. The people from the primordial Zhao clan could no longer sit still. Ji Fei had a great enmity with them, and this enmity could no longer be resolved. The two sides were destined to fight. Someone wanted to take advantage of the fact that Ji Fei was severely injured to eliminate him. Some of the old-timers set out to find Ji Fei and get rid of him. Otherwise, if Ji Fei continued to grow, it would be a disaster for them. In the distant past, a successful martial artist could be said to be an invincible existence. Although Ji Fei's cultivation had not reached that level, he had already taken the most crucial step. Half-step Saint Realm martial artists could do whatever they wanted in the human realm and compete with demi-saints. I didn't expect him to survive. Outside of the 100,000 Great War, a war chariot stopped high up in the sky. Lee flames curled about it, and fiery energy surged. It was as if a divine sun was hanging there, releasing terrifying heat. This was the Vermilion Bird Clan's Lee Fire Chariot. It was a saint artifact refined by a reorganized ancestor. This chariot was currently the Vermilion Bird Clan's princess's personal carriage. The descendant of the martial ancestor's bloodline has appeared. How interesting. Another voice came from the Lee Fire Chariot. The human realm is in a great era. Perhaps it's time for those who have disappeared to return. The Vermilion Bird Princess sighed. The arrival of the human realm was a sign that a storm was about to sweep through the entire cultivation world. Right now, this superstorm was still brewing. Just one more fuse would be needed to trigger it. Let's go. We need to prepare as well. Another voice sounded. No one would have thought that there was another person on the Vermilion Bird Princess's carriage. Soon, the Lee Fire Chariot disappeared into the distance. Just as the Lee Fire Chariot left, a figure appeared in the sky. This person was the madman of the White Tiger clan, the Tiger Emperor. The Tiger Emperor looked at the direction where the Lee fire chariot disappeared. He then snorted coldly and turned around to leave. The four ancient clans of the southern wasteland were not as united as they seemed on the surface. The competition between them was extremely intense as well. There seemed to be some sort of conflict between the Vermilion Bird Princess and the Tiger Emperor. The Vermilion Bird Princess and the Tiger Emperor were definitely two of the most outstanding characters within the four ancient clans. Roar. Just as everyone was leaving the demonic realm, a horrifying demonic roar came from the depths of the realm. A powerful figure of the demon clan walked out as a torrential demonic aura shrouded the entire world. A gigantic demonic figure could be vaguely seen within the demonic aura. None of the powerful figures of the demon clan dared to come out under the intimidation of the Extreme Northman. Once the Extreme Northman left, these powerful figures would no longer have anything to worry about. Find that human and kill him, a powerful figure of the demon clan uttered. Demons and the bloodline of martial ancestor were mortal enemies in the distant past. The powerful figures of the demon clan didn't want to see the successor of the bloodline of martial ancestor grow up. On this day, the entire cultivation world was in turmoil. Even the Demons clan dispatched powerhouses to hunt down Jiu Fei. These people only had one thought: to kill Jiu Fei while he was severely injured. It should be noted that once Jiu Fei recovered, he would be a supreme semisage level knight. It was not a legend that a martial artist was unrivaled among the same level. Jiu Fei's performance was enough to prove it. When these forces dispatched their powerhouses to hunt down Jiu Fei and the others had long left the innumerable huge mountains. They didn't even return to Dragon Emperor City. The current Dragon Emperor City was not safe anymore. South Wilderness was the territory of four ancient clans. Even the force of Jiu clan of remote antiquity could barely extend into Dragon Emperor City. Additionally, an unrivaled figure appeared in Jiu clan of remote antiquity. It was not because of luck that Jiu clan of remote antiquity could occupy a region in innumerable huge mountains. Instead, it was because of their great power. As the descendants of ancient human emperors, Jiu clan of remote antiquity had a profound background. Even the demon domain in innumerable huge mountains dared not offend Jiu clan. That unrivaled figure of Jiu clan was very mysterious. Nobody had seen his face. However, his military exploits were extraordinary. This person once deepened into the demon domain and killed more than one great demon. As a result, the powerful figures of the Demons clan chased after him. However, even the powerhouses of the demon race couldn't stop this person from the Jiu clan of the primordial desolation. He easily escaped the demon realm. This mysterious man had a title, and that was Emperor Jiu. Some people compared him to the young human emperor of ancient times. This Emperor Jiu was indeed not much inferior to the young human emperor of ancient times. Boss, why did we come to this place where birds don't shit and turtles don't lay eggs? Chapter 1790. There were basically no trees in this desolate mountain range. Even if there were only a few short, withered trees swaying in the wind. Along the way, Jiu Fei and the rest could only see rocks and sand. There were no flowers or plants, and there were many withered trees standing between the mountains. These withered trees only had their trunks left, and they were almost rotting. How did this place end up like this? Jiu Fei and the others saw bones scattered among the withered trees. This place used to be full of life, but now it was dead. This desolate mountain range occupied 1,000 miles of land. Compared to the endless mountain range in the southern wasteland, it was insignificant and inconspicuous. Furthermore, there was no spiritual chi here. The spiritual chi was so thin that it was almost negligible. Everything seemed a little strange. This is the place. Jiu Fei decided to stay here. No one would have thought that he would come to a place with such thin spiritual chi to cultivate. Normally, Jiu Fei would need to find a place with abundant spiritual chi to recover his vitality because his life force was extremely weak. His body had been drained dry. What he needed the most now was spiritual chi. They then walked into the depths of the mountain range. Over there was a cliff. Below the cliff, countless rocks were scattered. They discovered that behind the rocks, there was a pitch-black cave entrance. Very good. Seeing this, the others couldn't help but nod their heads. This place was indeed not bad. He Tian then began to arrange a formation around the cliff. Runes flew out from his hands and branded themselves into the surrounding void of heaven and earth. In the entire human realm, only He Tian was able to create a formation out of thin air. Ji Fei walked into the black hole and saw that there were quite a few traces of animal activity inside. On the surrounding rock walls, there were also many scratch marks. It was obvious that a ferocious beast once lived in this cave. In order to recover his vitality, Ji Fei needed an enormous amount of heaven and earth's essence. His martial physique was still intact, but the martial force in his body was almost depleted. There was only a speck of chaotic spiritual light in his dantian. He was not lacking in heaven and earth spiritual qi. What he needed to do now was to try his best not to be discovered before he recovered his yuan qi. He knew that there were many people outside who wanted to take advantage of his weakness to take his life. However, how could Ji Fei's life be taken so easily? Up until now, those who wanted to take Ji Fei's life had all been killed by him. After Ji Fei entered the cave, He Tian and Ji Zhong stood guard outside. Although this place was inconspicuous, there was no guarantee that no one would be able to find their way here. He Tian was a very careful person. It was precisely because of his carefulness that he was able to survive until now. Inside the cave, Ji Fei sat cross-legged on the ground. The surrounding spiritual energy was extremely thin. It was too unrealistic to absorb spiritual energy from this side of the world. What he needed to do now was to activate the power of the three great inner worlds in his body to replenish his yuan qi. At this time, his condition was very bad. He could barely reconstruct his martial body. Now, only one immortal spirit was needed to take Ji Fei's life. Too weak. Ji Fei couldn't help but shake his head when he sensed his own condition. The yuan spirit in his glabella had also completely quietened down. It had sunk into a deep slumber. Only when his martial body recovered to its peak would the yuan spirit in his Niwen palace have a chance to awaken. Ji Fei adjusted his martial body and began to guide the heaven and earth spiritual qi in his inner world. The place where his dantian was located gradually lit up. It was a spiritual light visible to the naked eye. Countless spiritual lights spread from his dantian to his whole body. Ji Fei's martial body was like a withered tree that had come back to life. Under the nourishment of the spiritual lights, it once again glowed with vigorous vitality. This feels great. Under the nourishment of the spiritual energy, Ji Fei was so comfortable that he almost moaned. The vitality in his body was rapidly recovering, and the martial way true power was gradually growing. At first, the true power was like a stream, but later it became a river. The martial way true power flowed rapidly in his body, and the sound of wind and thunder gradually came from his body. His muscles, bones, blood, and flesh were vibrating. Some of the hidden injuries in Ji Fei's body began to heal. He did not dare to be careless. He began to operate the emergent secret technique and retempered his martial body. All the hidden injuries disappeared, and his martial body was completely restored. His mind gradually immersed in cultivation. He forgot the world, forgot where he was, and let his thoughts drift above the ninth heaven palace. Rumble, just as Ji Fei entered a state of cultivation, a chariot surrounded by demonic energy appeared thousands of miles away from the barren land where Ji Fei and the others were. A vague demonic shadow stood on the chariot, and a pair of blood-colored pupils swept around. Under the cliff in the depths of the barren land, He Tian laid down the heaven-deceiving great array, which concealed all auras. Even if someone passed by the cliff, they would not be able to find someone hiding under the cliff. Where the hell is that human martial artist hiding? On the chariot, the demonic shadow muttered to himself. This was a great demon that came out of the depths of the 100,000 mountains. He was incomparably powerful. On the ancient chariot, there were traces of blades, spears, swords, and halberds. The owner of the chariot was definitely an expert of the demons who had experienced hundreds of battles. Old demon, how dare you walk out of the 100,000 mountains? Suddenly, a loud shout was heard. A figure appeared in the distance and walked towards the demonic shadow step by step. There were 9 divine lights of the immortal path lingering around this person. Like an immortal descending from the 9th heaven, this was a black-bearded middle-aged daoist with a purple crown on his head, a purple ribbon immortal robe, and a floating sword in his hand. Reckless. The demonic shadow standing on the chariot laughed coldly. He stretched out his hand and grabbed towards the middle-aged daoist. A pitch-black hand appeared in the void, instantly covering a radius of tens of miles, and slammed down towards the middle-aged daoist. The void was collapsing, and a powerful demonic force was surging. This great demon had displayed his formidable combat strength. The middle-aged daoist was taken aback. This great demon was not simple. The first move he made was a great mystic art of the demons, the heavenly demon hand. The demonic might was incomparably strong. Buzz. The void trembled, and a purple divine sun appeared behind the middle-aged daoist's head. A god mirror appeared in the daoist's hand. He held the god mirror and shot it towards the incoming demonic hand. Swish. The purple golden light instantly pierced through the demonic hand, and the middle-aged daoist rushed out. Purple Sun Mirror. Chapter 1791. The demon that walked out from the depths of the 100,000 mountains was searching for Jiu Fei. The black chariot stopped in the air above a mountain and a demonic figure could be faintly seen on it. Purple Sun Mirror, you are from the primordial Tao sect. The demon was facing off against a black-bearded middle-aged daoist. The black-bearded daoist had just received an attack from the demon and it hadn't been easy at all. The demon gave him an extremely dangerous feeling. Who are you? The black-bearded daoist was shocked when he saw that the demon recognized the divine mirror in his hand. The Purple Sun Mirror was an important treasure of his sect. The person who wants your life. Although the demon was wary of the Purple Sun Mirror, he seemed to hate it very much. He attacked again. This time, demonic energy surged and 9 demonic dragons charged out from the demon figure on the chariot. Endless demonic energy condensed into 9 dragons that emitted powerful demonic power. They charged towards the black-bearded daoist. Buzz. The purple sun divine light behind the black-bearded daoist's head shone resplendently. On the purple sun mirror in his hand, immortal patterns of the great Tao were rapidly awakening. Swoosh. The immortal patterns on the divine mirror intertwined and a purple mirror light rushed out from the purple sun mirror, sweeping towards the 9 demonic dragons. Under the mirror light, the void was silently annihilated. As the demonic aura dissipated, the purple young mirror displayed its powerful might. The moment the mirror light came into contact with the demonic dragons, the 9 demonic dragons immediately dimmed and almost dissipated into the void. What? The demon figure on the chariot was clearly shocked. He didn't expect that the purple sun mirror would still be so powerful after leaving the hands of its original owner. Boom! A powerful demonic aura erupted from the demon figure on the chariot. A demonic spear stained with blood stabbed out of the demonic energy. It broke through the purple sun mirror's light and pierced towards the black-bearded daoist. The demonic spear sliced through the void and tore apart the world, displaying its powerful might. Swoosh! The black-bearded daoist dodged and instantly moved 3,000 feet. Tao patterns appeared under his feet and the void seemed to distort as he shifted positions. Star-shifting steps. An angry roar came from the chariot. You're Ziyang's successor. As he spoke, the demonic energy on the war chariot churned. Although the demonic figure's attack had missed, it did not continue to attack. Instead, the demonic energy spread out from the demonic figure's body to envelop a small part of the world. How dare you, demon? How dare you call out my sect's ancestor's name? I'm going to destroy your body and soul. The black-bearded daoist was enraged. Immortal light flickered around him as the power of the violet young mirror continued to rise. A sacred aura emanated from the ancient mirror. Ziyang's successor. Damn it. The fiend shadow seemed to have a grudge against the black-bearded daoist's patriarch. He charged out of the chariot and charged at the black-bearded daoist with a demonic spear in hand. The terrifying demonic might shook heaven and earth. All of the creatures in this mountain range were trembling in fear. Everything within a range of several thousand li became quiet, not a single creature's voice to be heard. Only the mountain breeze blew, the trees swayed, and the rustling of leaves could be heard. Boom! The heaven and earth shook and the spiritual energy of the entire region was disturbed. An intense battle broke out as the immortal Tao's purple light and the power of the true demon clashed continuously. There were mountains that were swept by the immortal Tao's light or the demonic energy, instantly turning into dust and dispersing from the world. A battle of this level was extremely intense and the impact was huge. The ripples it caused spread out tens of thousands of li, alarming many people. In the endless mountain range of southern wasteland, many people were searching for traces of Jiyu Fei. The battle between the demon and the black-bearded Daoist alarmed these people. Roar! Very quickly, a long roar rang out from afar. It lasted for a long time and echoed in the mountain range. A figure appeared on the top of a mountain far away. Great demon, die! That person shouted and attacked right away. A beam of sword light shot up into the sky and instantly crossed thousands of li of the void, heading towards the demonic figure in the middle of the demonic energy. The person who attacked was a powerful sword immortal. This kind of sword cultivator was far stronger than the average cultivator of the same level. That sword was extremely powerful. Even the great demon that walked out from the depths of the 100,000 mountains couldn't help but be moved. Clang! The great demon swept out with the demonic spear, smashing the beam of sword light away. It was extremely domineering. Bring it on, I have nothing to fear. The demon shouted. His battle intent was like a rainbow. With the demonic spear in hand, he fought with the black-bearded Daoist, forcing the Daoist to retreat continuously. It was obvious that he had the upper hand. Buzz! The sword light vibrated. On the top of the mountain far away, the sword immortal turned into a beam of sword light and instantly came close. The sword light that was smashed away by the demon instantly fused with the sword light formed by the sword immortal. This was the realm of being one with the sword. In an instant, the sword energy wave emitted by the sword immortal increased by several times. The powerful sword energy wave caused the world to lose its color. The demon was shocked. Where did this demon come from? How dare he come here and behave atrociously? At that moment, another loud shout came from afar. A white tiger that was as huge as a mountain appeared in the mountain ridge far away. A powerful tiger might appeared in the world. This was the arrival of an expert from the White Tiger clan. Furthermore, this expert was not simple. This huge white tiger was not his real body, but a phantom image. The aura of this expert from the White Tiger clan was released, forming an incomparably huge white tiger phantom image. Shit! Sensing the powerful aura of the White Tiger clan expert, even the demon could not help but be shocked. He could sense that there were still a few obscure auras in the distance. There were people hiding in the dark, watching from the shadows. The great demon suddenly attacked with all his strength, forcing back the black-bearded Daoist and the sword immortal. He then charged onto the chariot shrouded in demonic aura, directly shattering the void and charging into the chaotic void. What? No one expected that the demon would suddenly escape at that moment. Even if the black-bearded Daoist acted in time, it would be difficult for him to stop the demon. The demon tore through the void and escaped at an incomparably fast speed. The demon actually managed to escape. Just like that, the battle came to an end. Demons were the greatest enemies of the human world. Although these people all had their own goals in searching for Jiyu Fei, there was one thing they all agreed on, and that was to slay the demon. Seeing that the great demon had escaped, the few of them also dispersed. These were the experts sent by the major factions to search for Jiyu Fei. Among them, many of them wanted Jiyu Fei's life. Such fluctuations were naturally sensed by He Tian and Jiyu Zhong. These guys, after sensing the powerful auras of these people, even He Tian's expression turned solemn. None of these people were weaklings. The weakest was a pinnacle mighty figure. The black-bearded Daoist's cultivation level was not high. He was the pinnacle mighty figure. However, he had the purple sun mirror in his hands. That was an out-and-out sacred artifact. Moreover, the black-bearded Daoist was the disciple and grand disciple of the old freak Zi Yang that the demon had mentioned. Others might not be able to unleash the power of the purple sun mirror, but the black-bearded Daoist was the successor of old ancestor Zi Yang. Among these people, the black-bearded Daoist's battle prowess was not much weaker than the other experts. Ji Yufei was in seclusion, so He Tian and Ji Yuzhong didn't want to cause trouble. They only observed in the dark and had no intention of taking action. Even if the great demon had escaped, they wouldn't act rashly. These people didn't discover He Tian's group. No one knew that Ji Yufei was actually hiding in a barren land to recover his yuan qi. It had to be known that for people like Ji Yufei who had exhausted a large amount of yuan qi to transcend the tribulation, the fastest way to recover was to find a place where spiritual energy converged and devour endless spiritual energy to replenish their lost yuan qi. Therefore, any barren land was not a place that these people would look for. He Tian and Ji Yuzhong retreated to the grand array at the bottom of the cliff. At the bottom of the cliff, there was a pitch-black cave with strands of spiritual qi overflowing. Ji Yufei, who was inside the cave, was wrapped in layers of spiritual qi. Every pore on his body was expanding and greedily devouring the surrounding spiritual energy. The amount of spiritual energy required for a half-step Saint Martial body was too huge. Even if Ji Yufei drew the spiritual energy from his inner world into his body, it would be difficult for him to fully recover his yuan qi in a short time. Ji Yufei's martial body was like a bottomless black hole, constantly devouring the spiritual energy from his three inner worlds, refining it to replenish his chaotic energy. He even drew the essence of the heavenly spring of life from the world in his dantian. The essence of the heavenly spring of life was too vast. It provided a steady stream of spiritual energy for Ji Yufei. This was also the reason why he had to find a barren land to undergo seclusion. With the three great inner worlds in hand, Ji Yufei could carry three great spiritual qi repositories with him at all times. There was no need to worry about the depletion of spiritual qi. More than 10 days passed in a row. Ji Yufei was still in seclusion. He didn't have any intention of coming out. During these days, He Tian and Ji Yuzhong stayed outside the cave. They didn't leave even a step. Only when Ji Yufei recovered his yuan qi would they be able to move unhindered in the human world. During this time, many people appeared in the nearby area. However, due to the isolation of the grand formation laid out by He Tian, no one could sense Ji Yufei's aura. They also didn't discover that He Tian and Ji Yuzhong were hiding in the depths of the mountain range. Another 10 or so days passed. Suddenly, in a barren land in the southern wasteland, a powerful aura was emitted. Then, the entire barren land began to shake. The cultivators in the mountain range all turned pale when they sensed this aura. This is bad. When those who had a grudge against Ji Yufei sensed this aura, they knew that they had missed the best opportunity to kill Ji Yufei. Thus, all of them retreated at the first opportunity. Rumble. Chapter 1792. In the boundless mountains of the southern wasteland, a thunderous sound rang out, alarming all the creatures within a radius of 10,000 miles. A powerful force fluctuated between heaven and earth. In the mountains, the experts who were searching for Ji Yufei immediately rushed up to the sky and looked towards the direction of the fluctuation. They were incomparably nervous. It's him. This was the aura of Ji Yufei. Everyone recognized it. Ji Yufei's power was erupting. The fluctuation of his true force was vast and mighty, shocking everyone to the extreme. How is this possible? He actually managed to recover his yuan qi so quickly. At this time, everyone knew what had happened. Ji Yufei had recovered his true qi. He no longer hid, because it didn't matter even if these people who were chasing him sensed his existence. Some people wanted to take advantage of Ji Yufei's weakened state to eliminate this great trouble. However, at this time, everyone knew that it was too late. Ji Yufei had recovered his true qi. That was a powerful semi-saint martial artist. Who would dare to provoke him? Some people immediately retreated after sensing Ji Yufei's aura. At this time, Ji Yufei wasn't someone they could contend with. If they went up, they would only be courting death. Finally appeared. A voice sounded in the mountains. A war chariot rolled across the sky. The powerful devil might caused the heavens and earth to tremble. On top of the war chariot stood a devil shadow, holding a devil's spear in his hand. This great devil directly drove the war chariot towards the southern wasteland. At the same time, several shocking auras also erupted from other regions. There were also powerful existences rushing towards the region where Jiyu Fei was at. This old man better not get involved in this muddy water. In the mountains, an old daoist wearing a daoist robe stood on top of a mountain peak, looking at the southern wasteland in front of him. In the depths of his turbid eyes, a light flickered. The old daoist watched for a while, then turned around and left. At this time, the cave Jiyu Fei was in had already collapsed, and even the cliff had exploded. Endless primal chaos energy wrapped around a figure. Beams of primal chaos divine light flickered. It was a huge primal chaos sphere that was completely condensed from primal chaos essence chi. On the surface of the primal chaos sphere, primal chaos Dao patterns were faintly visible. They were 9 chaotic Dao markings. These 9 chaotic Dao markings seemed to contain all the truths in the world, and they emanated the aura of the grand Dao that was profound and unfathomable. Master has finally recovered. Jiyu Zhong and He Tian stood on top of a barren mountain in the distance. They were incomparably excited. Jiyu Fei had finally stepped into the semisage realm. His realm had completely stabilized and his martial body had also transformed and become even more powerful. With 9 primal chaos Dao runes imprinted on his body, Jiyu Fei's martial body had officially transformed into a chaos martial body. Furthermore, he had already taken a small step on the chaos martial body. As long as he could cultivate the chaotic martial body to the large success realm, he would be able to break the shackles of heaven and earth and achieve the great Tao of the martial saint. Martial saint, this was a name that had not appeared for countless years. The primal chaos ball had condensed a terrifying power. This kind of power rippled over a radius of tens of thousands of miles, shaking the heaven and earth in all directions. Countless living beings within a radius of tens of thousands of miles were trembling in fear. It's Jiyu Fei. At this time, all the experts in the southern wasteland had sensed it. Even some of the old antiques who were still in a deep sleep were startled awake. From the ancestral lands of the 4 major ancient clans of the southern wasteland, the azure dragon, the vermilion bird, the white tiger, and the black tortoise, divine senses rushed out and swept towards the location where Jiyu Fei was. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth in all directions crazily gathered towards Jiyu Fei. The primal chaos ball that was condensed from the essence of the primal chaos was constantly flickering, like a huge beating heart. Rumble, the void trembled as a strand of saint's aura shook the heavens. Jiyu Fei had successfully taken the most crucial step, becoming a half-step saint. This was something that had never happened in countless years. With the word saint attached to it, one would become different from the masses, possessing some of the characteristics of a saint. This was like a fish leaping over the dragon gate, becoming a dragon after leaping over the dragon gate. The current Jiyu Fei was no longer a fish, but neither was he a dragon. He could only be considered as a half-dragon because he had yet to truly leap over the dragon gate. Even so, there were only a few people in the human realm who could be a match for Jiyu Fei. Boom! Just as Jiyu Fei was absorbing the essence of heaven and earth, a muffled sound came from the distance. A war chariot shrouded in demonic energy came crashing down from the sky, rapidly approaching Jiyu Fei. A powerful demonic aura appeared between the heaven and earth. Demons. Seeing the war chariot shrouded in demonic energy, He Tian and Jiyu Zhong couldn't help but change their expressions. Courting death. He Tian was about to soar into the sky to meet the demons head-on. However, at this moment, a huge hand appeared in the sky, slapping towards the war chariot. The palm force shook the heavens and earth. Bam! The war chariot immediately exploded. The demon shadow on the war chariot soared into the sky, wanting to escape. However, under the envelopment of this huge hand, this great demon had no chance to escape at all. Roar! The great demon shadow roared. At this moment of life and death, this great demon unleashed his full strength, wanting to break through the huge hand and escape. A blood-red light rushed out from the great demon shadow's hand. A blood-dripping demon spear manifested a powerful might. The Tao runes on the demon spear were constantly awakening. This great demon shadow was activating the demon spear in his hand regardless of the price. The power of the demon spear soared as a demon saint's power erupted from the demon spear. However, All of this seemed to have been predestined. The huge hand was like the hand of the heavens, destroying everything. The demon's spear was sent flying away, disappearing into the distance. Bam! As the huge hand descended, that great demon was directly smashed into pieces. In an instant, his body and soul were destroyed. He couldn't be more dead. Seeing this scene, Jiyu Zhong and He Tian couldn't help but be dumbfounded. This was too domineering, wasn't it? He killed a great demon at the half-saint realm with a single slap. This combat strength was too monstrous. One must know that that was a great demon at the half-saint realm. A great demon at the half-saint realm was truly invincible within the same realm. Just now, it was Jiyu Fei who attacked from within the primal chaos light sphere. The moment he attacked, he killed a great demon at the half-saint realm, displaying his invincible combat strength. What a powerful martial artist. Some of the experts who had just arrived just happened to see this scene. All of them stopped and watched, not daring to act rashly. Right now, Jiyu Fei was no longer an ant that they could slaughter. Buzz. The void trembled as a divine arrow shot over from the horizon, directly shooting towards the primal chaos light sphere that Jiyu Fei was in. Jiyu Fei's might wasn't enough to intimidate everyone. Chapter 1793. Jiyu Fei was still absorbing the spiritual qi of heaven and earth, but someone had already made a move against him. Swoosh. The void trembled and a divine arrow was shot from the sky, directly piercing through Jiyu Fei in the chaotic light ball. There were Dao runes circling around the divine arrow. This was a divine arrow that carried the law of the Great Path. Jiyu Fei did not make a move to stop it. Instead, he allowed the divine arrow to pierce through the primal chaos divine light and into the primal chaos light sphere. The divine arrow's powerful energy did not erupt. The chaotic light ball vibrated and countless chaotic lights quickly converged and were devoured by Jiyu Fei's half-saint martial body. Soon, the huge chaotic light ball disappeared and all the chaotic energy was devoured by Jiyu Fei's martial body. A figure appeared in front of everyone. Everyone was shocked when they saw Jiyu Fei's figure. They saw that the divine arrow that had been shot into the primal chaos sphere was actually caught between the index and middle fingers of Jiyu Fei's right hand. This was an arrow that contained the law of the Great Path. It was extremely powerful. Even a half-saint would not be able to catch it with 2 fingers so easily. Buzz. The divine arrow vibrated and wanted to break free from Jiyu Fei's hand. However, Jiyu Fei's fingers were like 2 ancient divine mountains. It was difficult to move. Jiyu Fei's cold eyes swept across the sky. There was a figure standing there. He stretched out his left hand and used the middle finger of his left hand to flick the body of the divine arrow. The divine light on the divine arrow immediately dimmed. Countless cracks appeared on the body of the arrow. The Dao runes on it were damaged. Then, the divine arrow shattered. "Eat another arrow of mine." A loud shout came from the distant sky. The figure standing in the sky drew his bow and narked an arrow. The endless spiritual energy of the world immediately gathered towards the person, bow, and arrow in a frenzy. What a fierce person. He actually dared to attack Jiyu Fei at this time. There were many people watching nearby. They couldn't help but be shocked. Who was that person in the sky? He actually dared to challenge Jiyu Fei. Jiyu Fei did not make a move. He let that person gather energy. Roar! In the blink of an eye, that person had completely drawn the divine bow. The endless heaven spirit chi that had gathered towards the divine arrow. Profound runes appeared on the divine arrow on the bowstring, and it gave off a dazzling divine light. This was a heaven-shaking power. This arrow could definitely injure a half-step saint. Come on. Jiyu Fei stood under the sky. His eyes were calm and deep. At his level of cultivation, there were very few people who could threaten his life. He wanted to test just how powerful a half-step martial sage realm martial body was. Humph. The man sneered and let go of the bowstring in his right hand. Ting. With a bang, the divine arrow on the bowstring immediately turned into a beam of divine light. It soared thousands of meters into the sky and shot towards Jiyu Fei. This arrow was incomparably powerful. The light of the divine arrow was like a divine rainbow that tore through the sky and pierced through the void. In an instant, it had already shot in front of Gu Fei. Buzz. The void around Gu Fei vibrated. Then, a ball of chaotic divine light rushed out from his body and enveloped Gu Fei. Ripples visible to the naked eye spread out from the chaotic divine light. Boom! The divine arrow transformed into an arrow of light and shot directly at the layer of primal chaos chi around Gu Fei's body. It was as if 100,000 ancient divine mountains were crashing towards Gu Fei at an extreme speed. A large portion of the void around Gu Fei was annihilated by the impact of the powerful force. However, Gu Fei was like an immortal divine mountain. He did not retreat at all and completely blocked the power of the arrow. The divine arrow hit the chaotic chi, but it only pierced the arrowhead and could not move forward another inch. Just SOSO. Gu Fei threw a punch at the divine arrow in front of him. The divine arrow was immediately shattered by his punch. At this time, Gu Fei's expression changed. The person with the divine bow had actually escaped. Preposterous, Gu Fei was furious. However, he could not do anything. After that person shot that shocking arrow, he immediately tore through the void and teleported to some unknown place. However, Gu Fei had already remembered this person's aura. If they met again, this person would not be so lucky. The battle that everyone was anticipating did not break out. The spectators in the nearby area did not make a move, and Gu Fei's enemies immediately retreated. Gu Fei had already fully recovered his vitality. At this moment, even a quasi-sage level knight might not be able to suppress this semi-sage martial body, which could be said to be unrivaled among the same level. When the few forces that had enmity with Gu Fei received the news, they were all terrified. The desolate Zhao clan, Dongfang clan, as well as the Beitang clan, these three major forces' disciples immediately evacuated from the southern wasteland. That little guy has really promoted to a semi-sage level knight. An old voice drifted from the residents of the powerhouses of Dongfang clan in Dragon Emperor City. Some people were sitting in a pavilion. The pavilion was surrounded by small bridges and flowing water. Flowers, grasses, and trees were decorating the rockery. Birds were chirping on the twigs, which looked tranquil. There were not too many such tranquil courtyards in Dragon Emperor City. That guy has really grown up. An old man in cyan let out a deep sigh in the pavilion. Although Dongfang clan was powerful, Gu Fei was not weak. Dongfang clan was in trouble. Two ancestors, before the human emperor's seal is sent back to our ancestral land, how about we get rid of this trouble with it? A young cultivator suggested to the two old men in front of him. Everyone knew that Dongfang clan had the human emperor's seal. In the virtual sky world not long ago, this human emperor's seal displayed its shocking power. After arousing the power of his bloodline, with the help of the human emperor's seal, Join ancient semisage could even be on par with Ghost Emperor Fengju. This method won't work. My vitality has not recovered yet. The black-robed old man frowned. This old man was Join ancient semisage. His vitality had been damaged in the battle in the virtual sky world. It would not be easy for him to recover. Then what should we do? Do we just let that Gu Fei continue to grow? The young cultivator asked. We'd better wait and see. We're not the only ones who want to kill that Gu Fei, the star ancient semisage said. It was not that they didn't want to take action, but they couldn't because their vitality had been damaged in the battle in the virtual sky world. Although the young cultivator was unwilling, he had to accept this reality. Chapter 1794. The news that Gu Fei had promoted to a semi-sage level knight had long spread across Dragon Emperor City. In the early evening, Dragon Emperor City was still very boisterous. On one side of the avenue of Dragon Emperor City, there was a high-rise pavilion, which was much higher than all the neighboring pavilions. On the door of this pavilion, there were 3 large words written in flamboyant calligraphy: Drunken Immortal Residence. I've not imagined that he could promote to a semi-sage level knight. A sigh drifted from the 9-story pavilion of Drunken Immortal's residence. Zhongli Meng was the spokesperson of Zhongli clan. In Dragon Emperor City, she was smooth and slick. Even the rising talents of the 4 ancient clans had to show respect to her. Although such a fairy didn't cultivate any earth-shaking battle skill or ability, she had the entire Zhongli clan on her back. In South Wilderness, although Zhongli clan was not particularly powerful, its force was deeply rooted in South Wilderness. Its background was far more profound than what it looked like. I have to get his martial body's true blood. Another voice sounded out. It was the voice of a man, and he sat in front of Zhongli Meng. His face was hidden in the shadows, and under the dim light, no one could see his face clearly. Elder brother, do you want to? Zhongli Meng was moved by his words. I only need a few kinds of true blood to form the most powerful battle body. The man said these words. Nobody knew about the background of Zhongli clan. Nobody even knew the origin of Zhongli clan. They only knew that Zhongli clan appeared at the same time as the four ancient clans. The fact that the Zhongli clan was able to survive since the ancient times and not be buried in the long river of history was sufficient to show how extraordinary the Zhongli clan was. It's not easy to get Jiyu Fei's true blood. Zhongli Meng murmured. Besides Zhongli Meng and her elder brother, many people in Dragon Emperor City were thinking about Jiyu Fei. Nobody dared despise a semisage level knight, especially a semisage level knight. Cyan Dragon, he's not qualified to be the current Cyan Dragon of Cyan Dragon clan anymore. Many powers of Cyan Dragon clan were gathering in the Mage's mansion of Dragon Emperor City, including some old guys who had woken up from deep sleep. In the main hall of the City Lord's mansion, a white-haired old man said. There was a person sitting on the throne at the center of the hall. Dragon Chi revolved around that person, and his blood chi was exuberant. He was the current Azure Dragon of the Azure Dragon clan. It's not up to you to decide who can become the current Azure Dragon of our Azure Dragon clan. The other old man and the white-haired old man stood opposite each other. It seemed like the Azure Dragon race was not united. He has lost the power of his bloodline. How can he be qualified to be the Azure Dragon? To become the current Azure Dragon of the Azure Dragon clan, the strength of one's bloodline was very important. In fact, it was so important that it could decide which of the clan's younger generation would become the Azure Dragon. The elders below spoke one after another, arguing until their faces turned red. In fact, these people only had one goal, and that was to get the person they supported to take the seat. The Azure Dragon clan was divided into a few factions. These people all had the support of the younger generation. The current Azure Dragon was a member of the clan leader's bloodline. His bloodline was pure, and his bloodline was the strongest among the younger generation. The other factions had no objections to him becoming the Azure Dragon. However, that day when the Azure Dragon fought with Jiyu Fei, he had lost the power of his bloodline. Now, what he had to face was not pressure from Jiyu Fei, but pressure from his own clan. Within the Azure Dragon clan, there were many people who wanted to pull the Azure Dragon down from his throne. Have you all said enough? The Azure Dragon in the main hall spoke. Those elders were very unhappy. However, they were not willing to publicly fall out with the Azure Dragon. One must know that the Azure Dragon was still the Azure Dragon now. He had a high status in the clan. The Azure Dragon swept his gaze across the crowd below. If you want to sit on my seat, you'll have to show some strength. The Azure Dragon said coldly. As long as someone defeats me, this seat will be his. The Azure Dragon's meaning was very simple. If they wanted to pull him down, they would have to challenge him and defeat him. Only then would they have the qualifications to become the Azure Dragon of the Azure Dragon clan. The title of Azure Dragon was the goal of the younger generation of the Azure Dragon clan. Everyone wanted to obtain this title, but there was only one person who could obtain this title. Mitch, this is very good. At this moment, a voice rang out in the main hall. A young man walked in from outside. Wu Sang, it's you. When the Azure Dragon saw this person, he couldn't help but be shocked. This person only had one eye. His right eye was only left with a hole, and there was a hideous scar on the right side of his face. You still recognize me? Wu Sang's single eye shot out rays of light. Streams of true dragon chi revolved around him, and the image of a dragon could be faintly seen on his body. You've returned. Azure Dragon was very surprised. This Wu Sang was once a strong opponent of his. During the fight for the title of Azure Dragon, He had fought with Azure Dragon for 3 days and 3 nights before being defeated in the end. In order to defeat you, I've cultivated hard for hundreds of years. Now it's time for me to take back everything that belongs to me. Wu Sang's battle intent surged. He stared at Azure Dragon and his body shook. A powerful bloodline power awakened in his body, and the image of a dragon rushed out of his body. "Mph, do you really think I don't exist?" At this moment, an old voice was heard. An old man sitting in the first seat below Azure Dragon opened his eyes. Hearing this person speak, the others couldn't help being startled. This person had quite the background. Even Wu Sang, who had wanted to attack the Azure Dragon aggressively, withdrew his aura and bowed respectfully to the old man. "Greetings, Azure Dragon." Wu Sang didn't dare to be disrespectful in front of this old man. Because this old man was Azure Dragon of the previous generation. He was a legendary figure of the Azure Dragon clan. He had been in power for nearly 10,000 years and had fought bloody battles. He was almost at the threshold of becoming a sage. He was an unparalleled powerhouse who was even more powerful than a sage to be. If it weren't for the fact that he was born at the wrong time and the Dharma of heaven and earth had changed greatly in his era, he might have long become a sage. 3 months later, at the ancestral land of our clan, the two of you will have a fight. The one who wins will get the title of Azure Dragon. Azure Dragon took a look at the current Azure Dragon and then at Wu Sang. Nobody dared to object to his words. "Very well, let's do that." The other old men nodded in agreement. It was very fair. In the cultivation world, the strong preyed on the weak. If the current Azure Dragon couldn't defeat the old man, he would not be qualified to have the title of Azure Dragon anymore. When Azure Dragon was facing the challenge of his former opponent, Jiyu Fei and the others had already left the mountain and arrived at the vicinity of Dragon Emperor City. "Boss, are we going to have a big fight this time?" He Tian rubbed his palms. He had long disliked those people. At this moment, they still had the chance to take revenge. "You take the lead." Jiyu Fei threw a glance at him. He Tian immediately became silent. He didn't want to be the vanguard. After all, Dragon Emperor City definitely didn't lack semi-sage level powerhouses, even quasi-sage level powerhouses. He was not Jiyu Fei, who was unrivaled among his peers. "Uncle Master He, what's wrong with you?" Jiyu Zhong asked as he watched He Tian with a faint smile. "You brat, how dare you make fun of your Uncle He?" He Tian was afraid of Jiyu Fei, but he wasn't afraid of Jiyu Zhong. He kicked out, wanting to make Jiyu Zhong tumble. However, Jiyu Zhong was extremely quick-witted and dodged with a flash. "Alas, you brat," He Tian wanted to chase after him. However, Jiyu Fei stopped him at this moment. "Well, go inside and check whether Zhao Clan and Dongfang Clan are still in the city." Jiyu Fei didn't intend to let go of Zhao Clan and Dongfang Clan. He wanted to practice his skills on them. Now that they had become his enemies, he would never let them go. "Fine." He Tian nodded unwillingly, however, he still went inside. On a mountain peak outside Dragon Emperor City, Jiyu Fei and Jiyu Zhong were waiting. They had to figure out the situation in Dragon Emperor City before making the next move. They had to be careful, because Dragon Emperor City was not ordinary. This time, the moment Jiyu Fei arrived at Dragon Emperor City, he had sensed some special qi, which made him feel threatened. An unrivaled figure was in Dragon Emperor City. After 2 hours, He Tian came back with the news in Dragon Emperor City. "I've not imagined that people of Dongfang Clan are so afraid of death. They escaped away." Jiyu Fei and Jiyu Zhong were both shocked. Dongfang Clan was their primary target, however, they escaped away. Therefore, they could only deal with them in the future. According to the news brought by He Tian, they knew that people of Zhao Clan in remote antiquity were still in the city. "Someone in Zhao Clan in remote antiquity is still my enemy." Previously, Jiyu Fei thought that the animosity between him and the immortal girl of Zhao Clan had come to an end. However, it was just his naive thought. Many powerhouses of Zhao Clan in remote antiquity were killed by Jiyu Fei. All of them were supported by someone. Their relatives couldn't wait to tear Jiyu Fei apart. Many people in Zhao Clan in remote antiquity wanted to kill Jiyu Fei. However, as Ji Yufei had promoted to a semi-sage level knight, those people in Zhao clan in remote antiquity had to behave themselves. It was very difficult for them to kill Ji Yufei unless they used an imperial immortal weapon. Someone saw the immortal girl of remote antiquity in Dragon Emperor City. He Tian's eyes shone. The immortal girl of Zhao clan, as a god's favored one, she must have a lot of rarities. That woman is very powerful. You'd better not target her. Ji Yufei had fought the immortal girl of remote antiquity, therefore, he was clear about her battle strength. She was definitely an unrivaled powerhouse. Even He Tian might not be able to defeat her. It's time to go there. Chapter 1795. The people of Dongfang clan had already left Dragon Emperor City and returned to the ancestral court of the East Domain. Ji Yufei couldn't settle accounts with these people for the time being. The people of Buddhism sect in West Earth had also left. They were afraid that Ji Yufei would settle accounts with them after he became a semisage. Therefore, they all returned to Spirited Mountain in West Earth and made preparations in advance. The resentment between Buddhism sect and Ji Yufei couldn't be resolved. It was essentially different from that of Zhao clan in remote antiquity. The resentment between Buddhism sect and Ji Yufei was too deep. The old monk Heavenly Law had tried to kill Ji Yufei several times in Thousandfold Buddha Heaven. How could Ji Yufei let go of such a deep resentment? Furthermore, Ji Yufei had killed the third arhat of a highly respected Buddhist elder not long ago. As Ji Yuzhong was Ji Yufei's disciple, of course Ji Yufei would be responsible for this. The East Domain and West Earth were too far away from the South Wilderness. Even if there were teleportation arrays, it would take a lot of time. Ji Yufei didn't want to settle accounts with the two major forces so soon. However, there was one thing that Ji Yufei had to do. At dawn, Ji Yufei and the others entered 100,000 mountain range again. At this moment, the 100,000 mountain range was full of vigor. The cries of birds and beasts could be heard everywhere. There were faint clouds and mist lingering between the ridges. It was full of vitality. In fact, there were many places with dense spiritual qi in the 100,000 mountain range, which were suitable for cultivators to live and cultivate. However, there were already two major forces in the 100,000 mountain range. Furthermore, there were many dangers in the 100,000 mountain range. No one knew how many powerful existences were hiding in there. If one was careless, one might lose his life here. Roar. A deafening roar of a beast resounded. In a mountain forest, a demonic ape grabbed the legs of a tiger and tore it into two halves. On another mountain peak, a golden eagle with a wingspan of over 30 meters was grabbing a huge snake that was over 30 meters long with its sharp golden claws. It was pecking at the brain of the huge snake. This most primitive and bloody scene was constantly happening in this mountain range. These were the two most common things that Ji Yufei and the others had encountered. The fierce beasts and birds in the 100,000 mountain range were much more powerful than those in the outside world. It should be noted that the weak would be eliminated in the 100,000 mountain range. Only the strong could survive. Ji Yufei and the others didn't care about it, nor did they intervene. They directly headed towards the Zhu clan of the remote antiquity. The Zhu clan of the Desolate clan was a very special clan among the Desolate clans in the human realm. This clan's ancestral ground was in the 100,000 mountains. The Zhu family of the remote antiquity was a neighbor of the demon race, and they were also a force that prevented the demon race from entering the southern wasteland. This family had once produced an invincible Ren Huang. Their heritage was not inferior to that of other families of the remote antiquity. This family had been guarding this place for a long time, constantly fighting against the Devil clan in the depths of the 100,000 mountains. This is the ancestral court of the Zhu clan of the ancients. Three figures appeared at the top of a mountain peak and looked at the area in front of them. The mountains in front of them were winding and lush with trees. Each of the trees was over 300 meters tall. Some of the trees were even hundreds of meters tall. The huge canopies of the trees covered an area with a radius of more than 10 kilometers. There were birds flying above the canopies and dragons roaming the mountains. This was a place where spiritual qi gathered. There must be ancestral veins under the ground. Another land of dragons. All the good places in the world have been taken by these people. He Tian's eyes turned red again when he saw the area in front of him. The towering mountains were like dragons lurking above the ground. There were only a few places like this in the entire human world. The heritage of the clan of the clan of the clan of the clan is not something that ordinary forces can compare with. Jiyu Zhong was amazed. Only the clan of the clan of the clan of the clan of the clan that had produced invincible Renhuangs could have such a place. Ordinary factions would not be able to truly possess such a spirit land, and it would only bring them great disaster. This was because even more powerful factions would try to take it from them. There was no logic to this at all. A land of soaring dragons was enough to make all powers go crazy. One had to know what it meant for a great sect to possess such a land. It was not a coincidence that these ancient powers that had produced Renhuangs were able to continue to pass down their lineage. Moreover, in every era, there would be one or two unparalleled figures. Cultivating in such a place was definitely much faster than cultivating in those caves. Moreover, living in such a place would allow one to be nourished by the spiritual qi of the ancestral earth veins day and night. Over time, one's physique would also change. Shua. Just then, a figure dashed out from the soaring dragonland and quickly arrived at the top of the mountain where Jiyu Fei and the others were. It was obvious that the arrival of Jiyu Fei's group had caught the attention of the Zhu clan of the primordial era. Who are you? Why have you come here? The person was a middle-aged cultivator with a gentle demeanor. At first glance, he looked like a teacher in a village. It was as if he was not a cultivator at all. However, this was only the appearance of the middle-aged cultivator. In fact, this middle-aged cultivator was extremely powerful. Not many cultivators below the half-sage realm would be his match. I am Jiyu Fei. Jiyu Fei had no need to hide his identity, thus he revealed his background. What? The middle-aged cultivator's expression changed immediately. You are Jiyu Fei. The middle-aged cultivator sized up Jiyu Fei with glittering eyes. He knew Jiyu Fei's name. During this period of time, there was not a single cultivator in the entire southern wilderness who did not know Jiyu Fei's name. Jiyu Fei's name was too famous, causing the middle-aged cultivator to lose his composure. I am. Jiyu Fei said. Why are you here? Our Zhu clan has no feud with you. The middle-aged cultivator was shocked after hearing that this young cultivator was Jiyu Fei. Why did this madman come to the Zhu clan's ancestral ground? The middle-aged cultivator felt uneasy. Crack. The middle-aged cultivator crushed a jade talisman in his hand. Jiyu Fei glanced at his right hand and couldn't help but smile. Who dares to invade my Zhu clan? As soon as the middle-aged cultivator crushed the jade talisman in his hand, a loud roar came from the place in front of him. A shocking murderous intent appeared between the heaven and earth. You want to fight? Jiyu Fei did not move, but his eyes were sharp like the edge of a blade as he stared at the place in front of him. Swoosh. At that moment, a figure rushed out from the place in front of them. A violent wave of energy spread out. It was a tall figure that looked like a god of war. Ah, you dare to invade my Zhu clan? You are courting death. Chapter 1796. The arrival of Jiyu Fei's group made the people of the Zhu clan of the primordial dynasty extremely nervous. As the middle-aged cultivator crushed the talisman, a man who looked like a god of war charged out from the ancestral ground of the Zhu clan. He swung the black iron rod in his hand and swung it down at Jiyu Fei's head. As the rod swung down, an astral wind swept down from the sky. The mountain where Jiyu Fei's group was at was instantly filled with sand and pebbles. The trees around Jiyu Fei and the others were uprooted and then crushed by the biting cold astral winds in the void, sending debris flying in all directions. The astral wind continued to rage. Jiyu Fei's group had no intention of retreating. Roar. The man let out an angry roar that shook the mountains. He held the black iron rod tightly with both hands and swung it down with all his might. The extremely violent force shook the sky and the sky. Whoosh. Wherever the black iron rod passed, a pitch-black spatial crack would be torn open in the void. If one were to be hit by this rod, even a mountain would be smashed into pieces. The power of this rod made even the middle-aged cultivator's expression change as he backed away. Bang! The black rod swung down. What? The big man was shocked to the extreme. The staff he struck out with all his strength was actually blocked by a single hand. The violent power was unable to shake that person in the slightest. A large hand firmly grasped the black iron rod. Blood seeped out of the hands of the burly man that were gripping the black iron rod tightly. His wrists were broken, and blood dripped down along the black iron rod. The middle-aged cultivator was also shocked at this scene. He knew very well the strength of this mountain. This man was a battle immortal. His combat ability was much stronger than cultivators of the same level. However, this young cultivator caught the black iron rod that the battle immortal had swung down with all his might with just one hand. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have believed it. Ji Fei grabbed the black iron rod with one hand and revealed a sneer on his face. "I mean no harm. I'm only here to ask something." He didn't let go of the black iron rod. His voice was extremely calm. At his level of cultivation, he had nothing to fear even if he were to face an ancient desolate power. Even if his opponent used a Renhuang divine weapon, he might not be able to threaten his life. Roar! The burly man roared again and again as he tried to pull the black iron rod out of Ji Fei's hand. However, Ji Fei's hand did not budge at all. No matter how hard the battle immortal tried, even if he used all his strength, it was useless. At this moment, this war immortal finally understood how strong and terrifying his opponent was. As the saying goes, a person's name is like a tree's shadow. This Ji Fei's battle prowess was truly terrifying. "Since you don't have any ill intentions, how about we just let it go?" The middle-aged cultivator walked over. At this moment, he realized that Ji Fei's reputation was well-deserved. In fact, he was even stronger than he had expected. A successful martial body was truly powerful. It was probably invincible among those of the same level. This tall battle immortal was a battle maniac nurtured by the Zhou clan of the Desolate Era. He lived by fighting and protected the Zhou clan of the Desolate Era. However, such a powerful battle immortal, in his opponent's eyes, was probably no stronger than an ant. Ji Fei swung his right hand that was holding onto the black iron rod. The battle immortal, along with the black iron rod, flew out and fell into the soaring dragon field. "Brother Ji, sorry for not coming out to greet you." At this moment, a few silhouettes walked out from the soaring dragon field. The one leading them was a young cultivator wearing a golden crown. Judging from his appearance, this cultivator was only in his 20s. However, everyone knew that in the world of cultivation, one could not judge a person's age based on their appearance alone. Ji Fei was startled when he saw the young cultivator. He had never seen this person before. Since when did the Zhou clan of the Desolate Era produce someone like this? He sensed an extremely powerful ripple of energy from this young cultivator. The young man quickly arrived at the mountain where Ji Fei and the others were. "You can leave now," the young man said to the middle-aged cultivator. The middle-aged cultivator quickly nodded and left. "Brother Gu's name is truly well known among Emperor Zhu. You truly live up to your reputation." Emperor Zhu seemed to be a friendly person. He did not seem to be distant in front of Ji Fei's group at all. His friendliness made Ji Fei's group feel a little embarrassed. Emperor Zhu. Ji Fei fell into deep thought. Was there such a person in the Zhou clan of the Desolate Era? I have been in seclusion and have only come out recently. It is not surprising that Brother Ji has never heard of my name. Emperor Zhu smiled. His face remained smiling. "Oh, I see." Ji Fei's group nodded. No wonder they had never heard of such a person in the Zhou clan of the Desolate Era. It seemed like he had only just started out. "I have no ill intentions. I just want to ask something. I will leave after that." Ji Fei was very direct. He wanted to know one thing. "Oh, I don't know what Brother Ji wants to know. I will tell you everything I know," Emperor Zhu said. Buying a favor from Ji Fei wasn't a bad thing. Then, Ji Fei asked Emperor Zhu about Guangqing Celestial Sect. He also asked about Li Mengyaro, the little junior martial sister of Guangqing Celestial Sect. The reason why Ji Fei came here was to know about Li Mengyaro. Li Mengyao. Hearing this, Emperor Ju revealed an unnatural expression on his face. Brother Ju, do you know about Li Mengyao and Junior Marshal Sister Li's current situation? Ji Fei was a little nervous. After all, he and Li Mengyao had an unclear relationship in the virtual sky world back then. Junior Marshal Sister Li, Brother Ji Yu, hearing that Ji Fei actually called Li Mengyao Junior Marshal Sister, Emperor Ju's expression became even more colorful. He had just started cultivating and didn't know about the relationship between Ji Fei and Li Mengyao. In fact, even the higher-ups of the Zhu clan of the desolate antiquity would have to investigate for a long time to find out about the relationship between Ji Fei and Li Mengyao. After all, the three great Dao sects of the human realm had completely declined by this time. Among the three great Dao sects, only Guangcheng Celestial sect still had disciples in the cultivation world. Taishan sect was destroyed and Shangqing sect was hidden. There were many people who knew about this history, but not many people knew that Ji Fei came from Taishan sect. It's hard to explain the relationship in detail. I just want to know how Junior Marshal Sister Li is now. Ji Fei looked at Emperor Ju. He wanted to know what he wanted to know from Emperor Ju's mouth. Li Mengyao? Isn't she the disciple that Grandmaster Ling Yu accepted back then? A middle-aged man standing next to Emperor Ju said. Where is Junior Marshal Sister Li Mengyao? Chapter 1797. Thousands of years ago, the Zhu clan of the Desolate Era produced a woman who specialized in the Tao of the sword. Later on, this woman rose to fame in the human realm and was known as the Sword Immortal. After thousands of years, if that female Sword Immortal didn't die, then her current cultivation would definitely be extremely powerful. The reason why Ji Fei came to the Zhu clan of the Desolate Era was for Li Mengyao. This woman that he had a special relationship with for a period of time. Even he himself couldn't explain why he couldn't forget about this woman. Even after hundreds of years, Li Mengyao's figure still appeared in Ji Fei's heart from time to time. He had never truly forgotten about her. Li Mengyao is the inner disciple of the Spirit Moon ancestor. I really can't say for sure about her current situation. Emperor Ju muttered to himself for a while before saying this. The Spirit Moon ancestor had a special status in the Zhu clan. Even he had only seen her a few times. Li Mengyao was even more mysterious. Ever since she was accepted as the inner disciple of the Spirit Moon ancestor, she never showed her face to anyone. Her face was always covered by a veil. This veil was refined by an expert. Even those with divine eyes wouldn't be able to see through it. In the entire Zhu clan of the Desolate Era, there weren't many who had seen Li Mengyao's true appearance. Even a core disciple like Emperor Ju hadn't seen her before, let alone others. Where is the cultivation place of Senior Spirit Moon? Ji Fei directly asked about the location of the Spirit Moon ancestor. Clearly, he wanted to pay a visit to this Spirit Moon ancestor. At his level of cultivation, there was nowhere in this world that he couldn't go. The Spirit Moon ancestor's cultivation must have already transcended the mortal realm and entered the divine realm. However, in this human realm where one couldn't enter the divine realm, this senior's cultivation was only at the quasi-sage realm. Ji Fei was very confident that the current him didn't fear the quasi-sage realm. Unless it was an abnormal existence like Ghost Emperor Fengju, no one could truly threaten him. This, Emperor Ju was troubled. As a core disciple of the Zhu clan of the Desolate Era, he was very clear about the temperament of the upper echelons of the Zhu clan. This Spirit Moon ancestor had been out of the world for many years. Even if some of the outstanding disciples in the clan wanted to meet this ancestral master and ask for her guidance, it was not an easy thing to do, let alone an outsider like Ji Fei. However, Emperor Ju was unwilling to directly reject Ji Fei. One must know that the person in front of him was a martial saint. If there were no accidents, this person would have a martial body of great success. At that time, very few people in the world would be a match for Ji Fei. The great perfection martial body was comparable to a sage and could stand shoulder to shoulder with a sage. Although it was not a martial sage, its combat strength was strong enough to compete with an ordinary sage. Above the large success martial body was the indestructible martial body. If he cultivated the indestructible martial body, No one in the human world would be a match for Jiyu Fei. Emperor Ju's vision was very far-sighted. If he could befriend such a person, it would definitely be a great boon for the Ju clan of the desolate antiquity. Furthermore, even if Jiyu Fei's martial body could not reach the greater success stage, or even if he was killed, it would not be a loss to the Ju clan. Many thoughts flashed through Emperor Ju's mind. At this time, Jiyu Fei didn't seem to be in a hurry on the surface, but his heart was beating much faster than usual. This Ju Huang, he was stuttering. He really wanted to punch this guy to the ground. Brother Jiyu, please wait. Let me go ask. At this moment, Emperor Ju could see that Jiyu Fei would not leave so easily. Li Mengyaro seemed to be very important to Jiyu Fei. This did not seem to be a bad thing. After pondering for a while, Emperor Ju made this decision. Wanting to meet the Spirit Moon Patriarch was not an easy thing to do. However, Jiyu Fei's request could not be ignored. One must know that at this time, if this matter was not handled well, the Ju clan would have one more powerful enemy. Please. Jiyu Fei did not say much. He knew that with his current cultivation and strength, even the Ju clan of the desolate antiquity would not dare to offend him. In the world of cultivation, the strong were respected. Emperor Ju left quickly. Jiyu Fei wanted to meet the Spirit Moon Patriarch, but this matter was beyond his ability. Who is Li Mengyaro? At this moment, in the Ju clan of the desolate antiquity in the depths of the soaring Dragonland, many old fogies were alarmed. Jiyu Fei's arrival made them feel threatened. The aura of a half-step saint was very sensitive to these old fogies. He seems to be the disciple that Ling Yu took in a few hundred years ago. Someone in the Ju clan murmured. These people all had high statuses in the Ju clan, belonging to the upper echelons. Every word and action of theirs would attract attention. This person is extremely powerful. His blood and qi are soaring. Could it be the martial body Jiyu Fei who has been in the limelight recently? Even though these old fogies were in the Ju clan's ancestral land, their divine sense had spread out and they could sense the aura on Jiyu Fei's body. Jiyu Fei's name had long resounded throughout the southern wasteland. Even these old fogies knew of the existence of a person like Jiyu Fei. In particular, the battle between Jiyu Fei and Azure Dragon not too long ago had alarmed many old fogies to spectate the battle. All of them had witnessed Jiyu Fei's strength. Even the current Azure Dragon of the Azure Dragon clan wasn't a match for Jiyu Fei. Jiyu Fei had forcibly refined the Azure Dragon's bloodline power. This method had shocked all the ancient human sovereign bloodlines and other bloodlines that had produced supremes. Soon, on a mountain peak in the depths of the Ju clan's ancestral land, a powerful sword aura burst out. It's Ling Yu. What is she doing? The others in the ancestral land were incomparably shocked. They hadn't felt such a powerful sword aura fluctuation for many years. Ancestor Ling Yu was about to make a move. The moment the sword aura fluctuation appeared, divine runes of the Great Tao began to appear in the Ju clan's ancestral land. A wave of energy enveloped the entire ancestral land. This area of the soaring Dragonland was protected by a peerless grand formation. This grand formation should be the handiwork of the ancient human sovereign. Although the ancient human sovereign didn't truly become an invincible extreme saint in the 9 heavens and 10 earths, his cultivation and battle prowess could almost compete with extreme supremes. No one in the current era could break a grand formation laid down by such a supreme existence. Even if Jiyu Fei had an extreme saint weapon, he probably wouldn't be able to. The Ju clan is very careful. Seeing this, Jiyu Fei couldn't help but glance at the people from the Ju clan. They were all extremely nervous. Some of them couldn't help but take a few steps back. It should be known that they were facing a madman. Even the Azure Dragon was no match for him. In front of this madman, they were simply ants. Who wants to see my disciple? A cold shout came from the depths of the Ju clan's ancestral land. A powerful sword aura fluctuation immediately spread out. The temperature of the entire area rapidly dropped under the impact of this sword aura. Chapter 1798. Sword Fairy Ling Yu had come out. She was the only one in the Ju clan of the ancients who did not cultivate the ancient sovereign's techniques. Instead, she cultivated the way of the sword. Thousands of years ago, Sword Fairy Ling Yu roamed the world with her sword. She was almost invincible in the human world. The sword in her hand could break any spell. Today, thousands of years had passed. Sword Fairy Ling Yu's cultivation must have become even more powerful and terrifying. Who wants to see my disciple? A white figure walked out from the depths of the Zhu clan of the ancients and headed towards the mountain where Ji Fei and the others were. Behind her was Emperor Zhu. Ji Fei's arrival caused the people of the Zhu clan of the desolate antiquity to be incomparably nervous. One must know that Ji Fei's fame in the southern wasteland had overshadowed everyone else. Everyone else's brilliance was just a tiny fluorescent light in front of Ji Fei. Although the battle between Ji Fei and the Azure Dragon had to stop because Ji Fei triggered the heavenly tribulation of the half-saint, the power of the Azure Dragon's bloodline had been destroyed by Ji Fei. He had already lost. The experts of the Azure Dragon clan knew very well what it meant when the bloodline of a supreme beast was destroyed. "It's me." Ji Fei stood on the mountain and looked straight at the white figure that was rapidly approaching. It was a woman, a young and extremely beautiful woman. Her white clothes fluttered in the wind. The woman came to the top of the mountain and stood in front of Ji Fei. "Return to simplicity." Seeing the woman in white, Hei Tian's pupils constricted. There was not a trace of sword qi on the woman. It was hard to imagine that she was an extremely powerful sword fairy. Her sword qi was completely restrained and did not leak out. She was like a normal cultivator. From her aura, there was no fluctuation that matched that of a sword fairy. Only someone who had reached the return to simplicity realm would have such a situation. The woman in white glanced at Hei Tian and then looked at Ji Fei. "You are that Ji Fei." There was no expression on the white-clothed woman's face. Her eyes were incomparably cold, as if she really was a fairy who didn't care about worldly affairs and didn't have 7 emotions and 6 desires. Immortals had to be cultivated to the level of a human. Even half-sages and quasi-sages would experience emotional fluctuations, such as joy, anger, sorrow, and joy. Even sages would experience such emotional reactions. However, the woman in front of him gave Ji Fei the feeling that everything in the world had nothing to do with her. She seemed to be an outsider. How could this be? Ji Fei had a bad feeling about this. "I am Ji Fei." Ji Fei looked straight at the white-robed woman. This woman looked very young on the surface, but she had already shaken the world thousands of years ago. She was definitely an old monster. When one's cultivation reached the level of Ling Yu Immortal Sword, it was not difficult to stay young forever. "My disciple won't see you." Sword Immortal Ling Yu said this directly. Hearing this, Ji Fei's heart skipped a beat. Li Mengyaro was really in the Zhu clan of the Desolation era. Furthermore, she had taken this ice-like woman as her master. "What if I insist on seeing her?" Ji Fei's expression turned cold. Even though this sword Immortal Ling Yu was strong, he wasn't someone to be trifled with. If they were to really fight, it would be hard to tell who would win. Of course, a sword immortal who had cultivated to the state of returning to simplicity would definitely have terrifying battle prowess. However, a martial half-sage was also an invincible existence within the same level. "Brother Ji, let's talk this out." Seeing that the situation wasn't right, Emperor Zhu walked up immediately. If these two were to fight, it wouldn't be a good thing. "H, I said I won't see her. Others might be afraid of you, but I'm not." An extremely obscure sword qi rippled out from sword Immortal Ling Yu's body. Her eyes lit up as well. She was like a heavenly sword that had just been awakened from its slumber. "Very well." Ji Fei's expression darkened. He took a step forward. Bang! As his right foot stomped on the ground, the entire mountain shook. Since the soft approach didn't work, he would use the hard approach. Seeing this, Emperor Zhu couldn't help but sweat profusely. He wanted to befriend Ji Fei, but this Grandmaster Ling Yu just had to make things difficult for Ji Fei. "This is the Zhu clan, not a place for you to behave atrociously." Sword Immortal Ling Yu said coldly. "I'm behaving atrociously. What can you do about it?" As Ji Fei spoke, a shocking aura erupted from his body. A monstrous blood qi surged out from the top of his head. It was as if a huge dragon was circling above his head. Such a powerful blood chi, Emperor Ju's expression changed. The human race martial physique was indeed extraordinary. Its blood chi was comparable to that of a primordial dragon. The strength of this martial physique was definitely extremely powerful. He Tian and Jiyu Zhong immediately retreated far away. This guy is going to be unlucky. He Tian and Jiyu Zhong didn't have high hopes for Sword Immortal Ling Yu. They were well aware of Jiyu Fei's battle prowess. He could even put up a fight against a demisage. Clang! Just as Jiyu Fei released his aura, a sword chime came from Sword Immortal Ling Yu's body. A shocking sword chi appeared between the heaven and earth. What is Ling Yu doing? An old voice rang out from the depths of the Ju clan's ancestral grounds. His blood chi is like a dragon. This human race martial physique is incredible. An old antique muttered to himself. Jiyu Fei's powerful aura alarmed everyone in the Ju clan. The grand formation protecting the Ju clan's ancestral grounds began to activate. The entire Ju clan's ancestral grounds were soon shrouded in mist that rose from the mountains. Is Ling Yu going to fight against a martial physique? Within the ancestral grounds of the Ju clan, those old antiques who were awakened seemed to have guessed Sword Immortal Ling Yu's intentions. She cultivated the Tao of the sword, advancing forward with indomitable will. Now that she had met an opponent as strong as Jiyu Fei, it was only natural that she wanted to spar with him. But Jiyu Fei didn't want to fight with Sword Immortal Ling Yu. After all, this woman was Li Mengyao's master. But she was forcing him to fight. Since she wants to fight, let's fight. Jiyu Fei had never been afraid of anyone. Even when he was weak, it was the same. If he was truly afraid of someone, he wouldn't have been able to cultivate to the demisage level. Only by believing that he was invincible could he walk further on the path of cultivation. Jiyu Fei was clear about what he needed and what he was pursuing. Only a pure Tao heart could allow him to advance forward with indomitable will. Being invincible wasn't just an empty statement. Good. Your Tao heart is firm. No wonder you could make it this far. Sword Immortal Ling Yu stared at Jiyu Fei with sparkling eyes. This little fella named Jiyu Fei was truly extraordinary. This person really had some sort of connection with her disciple. After Li Mengyao became Sword Immortal Ling Yu's disciple, she didn't tell Sword Immortal Ling Yu about Jiyu Fei. Perfect sword heart. You're not bad either. Chapter 1799. Clang. The sound of a sword resonated through the heavens. Sword Immortal Spirit Moon was like an unsheathed heavenly sword, emitting sword aura that shook the heavens and earth. On the mountain top, chilling sword aura rampaged. Trees that were struck by the sword aura fell from the sky. She had yet to make her move, but the aura that Sword Immortal Spirit Moon was displaying was terrifying. At this moment, even Emperor Ju retreated far away. No one else dared to get close. Come on, let me see what you've got. Sword Immortal Spirit Moon was famous thousands of years ago. Jiyu Fei had only made his debut a few hundred years ago. Sword Immortal Spirit Moon had cultivated for far longer than Jiyu Fei. In front of her, Jiyu Fei was just a junior. Jiyu Fei coldly harumphed. Facing this icy beauty, he was a little angry. She was too much. He just wanted to see Li Mengyao, that's all. This was not a big deal. You are a senior. Please. Jiyu Fei looked at Sword Immortal Spirit Moon. His tone was extremely calm, but his eyes were bright like two lamps. They shone so brightly that it was hard to look at them directly. In the next moment, Sword Immortal Spirit Moon's eyes turned extremely sharp. Swoosh. A beam of sword light shot out from her hand and swept towards Jiyu Fei's waist. The dazzling sword light was purplish gold in color and contained Tao patterns. Wherever the sword light passed, the void was torn apart. Ding. With a soft sound, Jiyu Fei reached out with his right hand. His index and middle fingers pressed together and blocked the incoming sword light. The sword fingers and the sword light clashed, letting out a metallic sound. This, Emperor Ju and the others from the Ju clan of the ancients were shocked at this scene. This man was using his flesh and blood to defend against Grandmaster Spirit Moon's sword light. Everyone found it hard to believe, But such an unbelievable thing actually happened in front of their eyes. It was real. Even Sword Immortal Ling Yu was shocked. Her opponent's martial body was truly powerful. It was able to contend against her immortal sword. She had never seen such a powerful body in her life. Shua. The sword light vibrated, and the sword light that had collided with Ji Yufei's sword finger suddenly split into countless purple-golden sword lights, surrounding Ji Yufei. The sword lights intertwined and formed a sword net. Bang! Ji Yufei changed his sword finger into a fist and punched out. A large hole was immediately punched out of the net of swords, and he stepped out of the hole. Heaven-covering palm. Ji Yufei did not hold back and immediately used this martial arts battle technique. His right hand turned into a hand that covered the sky. The huge hand filled every inch of the void between heaven and earth as it slammed down towards Sword Immortal Ling Yu. The massive hand encompassed the entire heaven and earth, completely sealing off Sword Immortal Ling Yu's path of retreat. The martial arts and battle skills that Ji Yufei displayed were not inferior to those divine abilities and great arts in the slightest. In fact, they were even more powerful. The supreme power was vast and mighty, shaking the heavens and the earth. Buzz. Sword chi vibrated as Sword Immortal Ling Yu displayed her formidable battle strength. Her entire body turned into a divine sword that shot up into the sky, clashing head-on with Ji Yufei's heaven-covering palm. She wanted to break through Ji Yufei's hand and rush out. Ling Yu lass, she's going all out right from the start. From the Zhu clan's ancestral grounds, an old man from the Zhu clan was watching the battle from the sidelines. Sword transfiguration. Ji Yufei could not help but exclaim in his heart when he saw this. This Sword Immortal Ling Yu had actually cultivated her sword Dao to such a level. This was truly becoming one with the sword. The sword was her, and she was the sword. Even becoming one with the sword is useless. Ji Yufei's voice was incomparably calm. He knew that many experts from the Zhu clan were watching from the shadows. If he did not display some of his strength, the Zhu clan would think that he did not live up to his reputation. Rumble, as the gigantic palm pressed down, the void beneath it began to crumble and disintegrate. 9 primordial Dao patterns appeared on Ji Yufei's palm, interweaving with the laws of the great Dao. This was a supreme and invincible martial Dao law. It was like a peerless martial ancestor attacking, capable of destroying everything. Oh no! The appearance of the primordial Dao patterns caused the old men in the Zhu clan's ancestral grounds to be shocked. This martial body was incredible. He had already comprehended his own Dao. As long as this Dao reached a certain level, he would be able to become a saint. However, this was extremely difficult. Since ancient times, especially during the late primordial era, no one had ever become a saint. Clang! As Ji Yufei's gigantic palm pressed down, the divine sword that shot up into the sky was immediately blocked. The 9 primordial Dao patterns locked the divine sword in place, wanting to suppress it. What? Emperor Zhu and the others were all shocked to the extreme when they saw this. This Ji Yufei was simply too strong. Even Patriarch Ling Yu's one sword to destroy all was useless against him. Buzz. Sword Immortal Ling Yu transformed into a sword. The divine sword vibrated continuously, wanting to break through Ji Yufei's gigantic palm. The dazzling sword light was incomparably scorching, as though it was going to melt the void. Emperor Zhu and the others found it hard to look at the divine sword directly. However, no matter how much Sword Immortal Ling Yu activated the sword energy in her body, she was unable to change anything. The 9 primordial Dao patterns seemed to have existed since the ancient times. The aura of the divine Dao coiled around them, displaying a great power. This woman is overestimating herself. Ji Yuzhong stood in the void and sneered. His master was a martial arts half-saint. No matter what one sword to destroy all was nothing in front of his master. The path of becoming a saint through brute force is truly too domineering. He Tian could not help but sigh. Ji Yufei's martial arts and battle techniques were too powerful. His single palm seemed to be able to shatter the entire world. It was terrifying. The battle prowess of sword immortals was much stronger than ordinary cultivators to begin with. Sword Immortals had another title, War Immortal. Their offensive power was definitely one of the best amongst all cultivators. However, Sword Immortal Ling Yu was not facing an ordinary cultivator. It was Jiyu Fei. Boom! Jiyu Fei's gigantic palm descended, causing the entire mountain to explode. Destructive ripples spread out in all directions. A beam of sword light shot out from the billowing dust. Emperor Ju and the others had no choice but to retreat far away to avoid this destructive power. Have mercy! An old voice rang out from the depths of the Ju family's ancestral grounds. A figure then appeared outside the ancestral grounds of the Ju family. Wah! At that moment, the beam of sword light took on a human form. Sword Immortal Ling Yu fell from the state of one with the sword. She coughed out a mouthful of blood. Jiyu Fei's attack just now had injured her vitality. This is the legendary martial body. Sword Immortal Ling Yu had made her debut thousands of years ago. However, it was already too late for anyone to become a saint back then. No matter how outstanding she was, she could not cross that threshold. In her era, there was no successful cultivation of a martial body. However, she had heard of the legends of a martial body. The human martial body only cultivated the physical body and not the primordial spirit. It walked the path of becoming a saint through brute force. The physical body was the source of power. When cultivated to the major stage, one would be almost indestructible. If one could truly cultivate the indestructible body, only the extreme Tao Supremes would be able to fight against them. Little friend, you have some tricks up your sleeves. The old man was old and clumsy. He looked like a man with one foot in the grave. However, Jiyu Fei did not dare to underestimate this old man. He could sense an obscure ripple of power from this old man. This was a peerless figure. Jiyu Fei knew that if he had not undergone the tribulation of half-sage, he would not have been able to see through this old man. The pressure that this old man gave him was far greater than the pressure that Sword Immortal Ling Yu gave him. Actually, Sword Immortal Ling Yu was not a weakling. It was a pity that she had met him. Old man, I'm only here to see an old friend. What you're doing is a little too much. Jiyu Fei said calmly. He did not let his guard down just because he had defeated Sword Immortal Ling Yu. The old man's cultivation and strength were definitely not weaker than his. Hihi, it's not a good thing for a young man to be impetuous. The old man laughed. He also felt an immense pressure that he had not felt for many years from this young cultivator. His instincts told him that this young man was very dangerous. Old man, do you want to fight too? Jiyu Fei was very direct. Things that could not be explained through words could only be solved with fists. Using one's strength to fight was often more effective than using one's mouth to solve a problem. Heart as clear as a mirror, courageous and courageous. Very good. Seeing how straightforward Jiyu Fei was, the old man could not help but look up to him a little more. People like this would not change their minds once they had made up their minds. This kind of straightforward nature was also a manifestation of the Tao heart. Only people like this could cultivate the most difficult skills. Their will was incomparably firm, fearless of all obstacles, and courageously. You're destined to be disappointed this time. At this moment, Sword Immortal Ling Yu walked over. She looked at Jiyu Fei and said these words. Greetings, old granduncle. Sword Immortal Ling Yu bowed to the old man. This old man had a frightening background. Even Sword Immortal Ling Yu had to address him as old granduncle. This old man was definitely a super antique. One had to know that Sword Immortal Ling Yu's status in the Ju clan was high enough. But even she had to be respectful in front of this old man. What did you say? Hearing this, Jiyu Fei's sword-like eyebrows immediately straightened and his eyes flickered. I said that you're destined to be disappointed this time. Sword Immortal Ling Yu's voice was extremely cold. You. Jiyu Fei's expression changed. Did something happen to Li Mengyaro? He unconsciously took a step forward. Young friend, calm down. The old man was afraid that Jiyu Fei would attack Sword Immortal Ling Yu, so he also took half a step forward. One had to know that this person was a martial half-sage. Once he attacked, it would definitely be a thunderous attack. Sword Immortal Ling Yu might be strong, but she was definitely not a match for this young cultivator. My disciple is currently in a life and death seclusion. If you want to destroy her body and soul, you'll have to alert her. Sword Immortal Ling Yu said. Li Mengyaro is in a life and death seclusion. Jiyu Fei was shocked. Life and death seclusion wasn't a normal seclusion. It was a secret art that allowed one to wander between life and death.